Chapter 536. From Wang Lu's point of view, there were some problems with the previous generation of Spirit Sword Sect elders. Clues could be seen from the management trainee program. It was rare for a poor and weak sect to be able to gather so many talented disciples at a certain point in time. If it were any other sect, they wouldn't even have enough time to take good care of them, but they had the guts to throw all their disciples into the savage land to experience the test of life and death. It was like pulling seedlings to help them grow, beautifying them into jade that wasn't cut and polished. To put it nicely, this was ambition and full of courage. To put it bluntly, this was simply disregarding human life. Of course, considering that Wang Lu himself had also used the heaven-burning blood technique to develop the wisdom sect, he would not comment on the fact that Wang Lu treated human life like grass. However, there was no doubt that in the eyes of this generation of Spirit Sword Sect elders, the lives of the disciples were not the first priority. In contrast, revitalizing the sect was the real core task. Revitalizing the sect was, of course, a good thing. From the perspective of the manager, as long as the pros and cons were weighed, it was understandable to pay a certain price in exchange for the success of the sect. As for the failure of the management trainee program, the elders could not be blamed for the strategic mistake. Who could have expected that the savage land, which had been peaceful for thousands of years, would suddenly have a great demon king from an unknown world? However, at this moment, witnessing the elders of Spirit Sword Sect who were like moths flying into the flame to patch the heaven deficiency, as well as the last moment of the great Spirit Sword Sect's heroic words of immortality, Wang Lu's view on them was completely clear. This group of guys was not just a problem, they were basically sick. Perhaps it was because they grew up in the era when the survival pressure of the Lingjian school was the heaviest, and the situation was the most difficult, so their dedication to revitalizing the sect had reached the point of resentment. They did things regardless of the cost, regardless of the consequences, and completely lacked foresight. First of all, they concealed the change in the savage land. The elders obviously did not want the Wanxian League to know that the management trainee program of the Lingjian school had released a fierce beast from the demon world, and they intended to deal with it by themselves. By the time they discovered that the opponent's strength was far beyond their imagination, and that the crisis brought about wasn't something that the Blue River region alone could withstand, it was already too late. As for sacrificing the lives of all the elders to make up for the lack of heaven, it seemed solemn and stirring, but in fact, it was without a plan. Before the crisis was over, if they all died, who would shelter Ouyang Shang and the other disciples? Did he expect them to fend for themselves? The last sentence about being immortal was even more inhuman. The sect existed because of the people. If the people were all dead, what was the use of leaving an empty reputation? But no matter what, he was already dead, and there was no point in whipping his corpse. The living only needed to think about how to survive. For example, Ouyang Shang and the others had to consider how to survive under the wrath of the Demon King. It was not that there was no chance. The news that the Lingjian school's elder team had been completely annihilated would soon be known by others. After all, it was one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. It was impossible to hide the fact that the higher-ups of the Lingjian school had disappeared. Furthermore, the disciples who stayed behind to guard the school did not receive any orders to conceal the news. Once the outside world learned of the news, there would naturally be foreign aid. This process would not be too long, at most a few months or a year. However, for the Golden Generation, who had to survive in a desperate situation, one more day was a great torture. The crack in the sky had disappeared, the demons and monsters no longer appeared, and even the black tide had been dispersed. However, the demons in the savage land were still wreaking havoc. Although the power of the Demon King, who was severely injured by Azure Dragon, was greatly reduced, he still had an overwhelming advantage against a group of disciples. Moreover, the Demon King had an unusual obsession with the Golden Generation. For a demon who volunteered to open the passage to another world to invade 9 regions, since he could not achieve his biggest goal, then what he could do was to kill the talents of 9 regions as much as possible to weaken the strength of 9 regions. Under such a situation, the Golden Generation suffered heavy casualties. It was so heavy that Wang Lu could not even look straight at it. In the time travel timeline, because of Wang Lu's activity in the desert, the Demon King's plan to open the crack in the sky with the black tide was directly cut off, so that the story directly entered the second stage. Later, Wang Lu worked hard for 3 years and finally perished together with the Demon King. Although he sacrificed himself, he kept most of the others. Everything seemed to be very smooth. The tragedy of 100 years ago was just a heavy story, and there was no intuitive understanding. But now, there was. In the time travel timeline, Ouyang Shang and the others failed to stop the resuscitation of the Demon King in the desert. They did not even fully realize the hidden crisis in the desert and let 10 years slip away. Thus, the Demon King completely recovered. After a fierce battle, the demonic wolf Fenrir was killed. In despair, only a trivial fire was left, and the Demon King was left with an injury that could not be recovered for the rest of his life. Then the Demon King absorbed the huge magic power of Fenrir, and with the black tide, tore the sky and opened the passage. During this period, Ouyang Shang and the others tried to stop it, but it was useless. They wanted to send a message back to the sect, but the way back was blocked. Fortunately, there were elders of Spirit Sword sect who were good at divination. After noticing the abnormality, they led the crowd to come, so that everything was not irredeemable. However, the Golden Generation was already irredeemable. In the valley of the northern mountain, 2 girls in the uniform of Lingjian school were cautiously moving forward in the valley. Their clothes were ragged and their appearance was in a mess, but their eyes were firm like well-tempered steel. It was He Yu and Qing Shuang. He Yu walked in front and was observing a towering ancient tree with rapt attention. She stretched out her hand to stroke the rough trunk, and after a long while, she frowned and said softly to the person beside her. The marks left here 3 days ago have completely disappeared. The demon race has been here, we have to move our position. Behind He Yu, a slender girl with slightly immature eyebrows said in surprise, "We have to move again?" "No, it's not easy for us to find a broken spiritual vein, which can barely be used for cultivation." Qing Shuang, that's enough. Is cultivation more important than life? He Yu raised her eyebrows, which made the girl named Qing Shuang shut her mouth. The next moment, He Yu suddenly trembled, her face turned unnaturally red, and then a mouthful of blood sprayed out. "Senior sister. The tree is poisonous, I was careless for a moment." He Yu reluctantly finished her sentence, and then her right arm melted like a burning candle. He Yu was obviously no stranger to this scene. She smiled sadly and put her hand on Qing Shuang's shoulder. The king pill in her jade mansion fiercely rotated, and her original true qi was continuously transmitted out. "I'll leave everything to you. Go find Big Brother, and then survive, including my share." Qing Shuang held back her tears, nodded firmly, and then operated the king pill to accept He Yu's true qi. The movements of the two seemed to have been practiced many times. After a while, He Yu had been turned into a pool of dirty blood by the red blood poison. Qing Shuang knelt on the ground and cried silently. But after a moment, Qing Shuang wiped away her tears and stood up. On a gravel hill, Lu Sandao was bathed in blood. In front of him, the corpses of the demons piled up into a hill, but more demons rushed up without hesitation. Those demons were not of the royal family, but some cannon fodder-level servants. Their strength was weak, but they won in number. Lu Sandao was like an arrow at the end of its flight. Not long after, his sword defense was broken, and those beast-type demons rushed forward to bite his body. "Ha ha ha, you bastards want to eat me, then I'll let you eat to your heart's content today." With that, the king pill exploded, and the burst of sword chi swept in all directions. Hundreds and thousands of demons were stirred into meat sauce, and Lu Sandao himself did not even have his bones left. After Lu Sandao's death, a small flying sword, carrying a flickering ball of light, wobbled towards a certain place. This was a deep underground cave. 3 disciples of Spirit Sword sect guarded the entrance of the cave, stepping on the 3 individual sword array, struggling to resist the siege of thousands of demons outside the cave. Before long, the 3 of them felt that their magical power was exhausted, and it was difficult for them to continue. One of them clenched his teeth and said, "Wang Chenai, Xia Mingxian, you go first." Understood. Then, the palms of the 3 people gently touched each other. The leader spat out a ball of light from his palm, and then he grinned. "Remember to help me find a reliable person." Rest assured, Senior Brother Song. After many times of sacrifice, the disciples of Spirit Sword sect were no longer unfamiliar with life and death separation. Wang Chenai and Xia Mingxian didn't hesitate too much and just turned around to leave. Then Senior Brother Song turned around, and the King Pill in his jade mansion burst into pieces, which turned into thousands of flying swords and stirred up a bloody storm outside the cave. Next to a crystal-like calm lake, Xia Mingxian helped Wang Chenai walk slowly. While walking, he used the moonlight reflected on the water to heal his injury. However, it didn't take long for Wang Chenai to shake his head. "Junior Brother Xia, I don't think I can make it, don't waste your energy to heal me." "No. You've saved me so many times, how can I just watch you die? Consider it as my atonement. If it weren't for me and Zhangsheng, how could these things happen? You guys were implicated by us. Of course, I'm still better than that kid Zhangsheng. He's too unreasonable, he ruined the big thing for a woman." "Forget it, Senior Brother always says that when a person is about to die, his words are kind, so I'll say something nice. Mingxian, you must live." With that, he stretched out his hand and pressed it on Xia Mingxian's chest. "Mingxian, there are some words that I actually wanted to say a long time ago. I'm listening. There's actually a reason why I haven't had a girlfriend all these years." "Ha ha ha, look at how scared you are. Here, Senior Brother Song's belongings, oh, and mine, I'll give them to you." With that, an unquestionable warmth flowed into his jade mansion. Xia Mingxian opened his mouth and said with a trembling voice, "Who are you going to give them to? Who else is left?" Wang Chenye's eyes dimmed. "Everyone is almost dead." "Oh, right, give them to Xiao Wu. Big Brother has always doted on her." "Wang Wu? But she. Big Brother likes her so much, there must be a reason. Let's believe in Big Brother." In the end, are we the only ones left?" Ouyang Shang smiled wryly. "Zhangsheng, Feng Yin, Lu Xian, Fang He, Zhou Ming, Lu Li, Guanhai, Wang Wu. It's just the few of you. But, it's enough. Next, I'm going to do one thing, but before that, I need you to promise me one thing." Chapter 537. Eldest Senior Brother, don't worry, we have long been prepared to sacrifice everything. You don't need to tell us, we know. Feng Yin said in a deep voice. Lu Xian was also disheartened, living until now, my life is no longer my own. This rotten life, if eldest Senior Brother needs it, just take it. Fang He said, well, as long as we can defeat that demon king, a mere life is not worth mentioning. Zhou Ming smiled bitterly, originally, it shouldn't be us who survived, but senior sister Fei Ying and the others, so, enough. Ouyang Shang snapped, what are you doing? Who said you want to die? Feng Yin was stunned. But apart from dying, what else can we, a group of mediocre people, do? Live. Ouyang Shang said, what I want you to do is this one thing, no matter what, live for me. Now there are only you left in Lingjian School, but as long as you are alive, Lingjian School will not disappear. Lu Xian said, as long as eldest senior brother is alive, there is hope for everything. As for us, there is no one sect in the world." Ouyang Shang shouted again, "And before they died, they gave their inheritance to you. Do you want you to sacrifice yourself and let everything go to waste? Your life is no longer your own. Each of you carries the inheritance of others. You are not qualified to talk about sacrifice." "Yes, I understand. Remember, even if not for yourself, for those who died. Live for me, no matter what happens, you must live." After that, Ouyang Shang turned his head to look at Wang Wu. "I have something to say to you alone." Oh. After Ouyang Shang left with Wang Wu, Feng Yin and the others collapsed. Why is it us?" On the other side, Ouyang Shang brought Wang Wu to a secluded room. After entering the room, Wang Wu looked a little nervous. Ouyang Shang looked at her and smiled, then said, "I haven't said this to anyone, but you must know." "Me? 3 days ago, I single-handedly charged into the lair of the Demon King." "What? Don't be so surprised. Previously, he was severely injured by the demon Wolf Fenrir and master and martial uncles. His strength is no longer at its peak. As for me..." Wang Wu nodded lightly. She had known for a long time that Ouyang Shang's true strength was far beyond the imagination of others. After more than 10 years of experience, Ouyang Shang had already taken the lead. At that time, I found an excellent opportunity to strike. According to my calculations, I should have a 70% chance of killing the Demon King. But when it comes to actual combat, I don't even have a 10% chance of winning. Why? Because my luck was stolen, and it even became an obstacle. You should know that I've always been favored by the earth, and the effect of my earth element celestial technique is especially good. But in the battle with the Devil King, every step I took felt like my feet were stuck in the mud, and there were layers upon layers of resistance. I couldn't even feel the earth element spiritual chi during the battle, and when I absorbed the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, I lacked one of the 5 elements. Also, the King Pill sometimes trembles and doesn't listen to me. Do you remember that I once told you about the origin of the so-called luck? Do you think that 9 regions can be regarded as an intelligent creature, and the luck is an investment in 9 regions? Yes, and since it's an investment, of course, it can be recovered. Ouyang Shang said, "At least, it can be understood that the Demon King has a higher management authority than me." A higher management authority? Wang Wu was surprised. How is that possible? Your luck is given to you by the 9 regions, which means that the entire continent recognizes you. How could the Demon King have enough management authority to recover the luck? Probably because the true identity of the Demon King is the fallen immortal. Ouyang Shang said. Fallen immortal? Yes, but it's just my guess. The limit of a cultivator is to ascend to become an immortal. Although the scene of the immortal world has never been spread in 9 regions, it would not be a dead water. I think there will also be competition, contradiction, conflict, victory and defeat. The winner will continue to live high in the immortal world, while the loser will escape into the hell where demons and devils abound. However, they are unwilling to fail and want to make a comeback. That's why there is a crack in the sky. They want to occupy 9 regions and then return to the immortal world through 9 regions. Although they are fallen immortals, they are still immortals, and their strength has exceeded the limit of 9 regions. And since they can become immortals among hundreds of millions of cultivators, their understanding and use of luck must be far above that of the cultivators of 9 regions. But in this way, it means that all the so-called heaven's chosen ones have become worthless in front of the fallen immortals. But, even so, he has been seriously injured and will not live for long. Yes, now this fallen immortal is no longer a concern, but I'm afraid there's more than one fallen immortal. Could it be that he tried to open the passage between the 2 worlds at all costs in order to welcome those cannon fodder into 9 regions? Behind the passage is a big world. But the crack in the sky has been filled. Before the crack in the sky appeared, couldn't he still enter 9 regions? If he's dead, it's hard to guarantee that there won't be another one. And at that time, will we still have such good luck to stop it? Wang Wu felt extremely heavy in her heart. She was silent for a long time and said, "Why tell me this specifically?" "Because you have to know." As soon as her voice fell, Ouyang Shang suddenly stepped forward and held Wang Wu's hand, which surprised her. She struggled subconsciously, but she couldn't break free. If it was more than 10 years ago, Wang Wu would have felt great happiness, but at this moment, she was extremely panicked. "It seems that you already know." Ouyang Shang smiled slightly and said, "You're indeed my most promising junior sister." "Eldest brother, don't," however, before her voice fell, a gentle warmth was transmitted from her hand. Wang Wu resisted even more intensely, but under the absolute suppression of Ouyang Shang, she had no choice. After struggling for a while, Wang Wu finally gave up. The power from her palm became more and more warm, constantly infiltrating her whole body inside and outside, nourishing her body, jade mansion, and primordial spirit. It made her more powerful. Moreover, it made her more powerful from the root. This kind of inherited method that could improve other people's aptitude and root bone could be said to be the first in the history of 9 regions. However, as the beneficiary, Wang Wu felt heart-wrenching grief. She raised her head high and tried not to let the tears in her eyes flow down. "Why me?" "Because only you have this ability." Ouyang Shang's tone has been stained with a trace of exhaustion. "Other people don't know your real talent, but how could I not see it? Don't forget, it was me who advocated for you to join the Golden Generation. Senior brother, yes, you're just a mediocre person with a low-rank spirit root. Others laugh at you for having a natural 5th-rank spirit root, but they don't know that you actually don't even have a 5th-rank spirit root. It's a miracle for you to achieve your current achievement with a low-rank spirit root. Sure enough, senior brother, you've already seen it. It's not just me, some of the elders have also seen it. Otherwise, with your previous achievement, it shouldn't be so difficult for you to enter the Golden Generation." Ouyang Shang said, "If your spirit root doesn't enter the middle rank, there's no hope for you to take the king pill. Even if you have the help of heavenly materials and earthly treasures, it's impossible to cross the threshold of Yuanying stage. This is the common sense since ancient times." Wang Wu bitterly said, "That being the case, senior brother, why did you? Because I never believe in common sense. At least, I never believe that common sense can restrain you. You've broken too many common sense to be able to come all the way to this day. How can my achievement be considered as breaking common sense?" Wang Wu shook her head, "Not to mention eldest senior brother, even among the other senior brothers and sisters, there are many people who are stronger than me. They're not worthy of senior brother's attention. Having external help is not enough." Ouyang Shang sighed, "In the Golden Generation, there are too many people who are favored by the heaven and earth, blessed by luck, so they can advance triumphantly all the way. Among them, I can be regarded as the best. But you have neither outstanding talent nor any luck. In fact, I'm afraid you're much more unlucky than ordinary cultivators. But you've still come this far, keeping abreast of the other people who are blessed by the heaven and earth. Because your inner strength is far stronger than others, you work harder than anyone else, you're more determined than anyone else, and you're smarter than anyone else. You have the true aptitude of a low-rank spirit root, but you can cultivate a cultivation technique that can only be cultivated by a middle-rank spirit root. Your understanding and creativity of cultivation techniques have long surpassed anyone, even I am ashamed of my inferiority. That's just an insignificant skill, no matter how hard I work, it's nothing more than going from low rank to middle rank. What's the point of this achievement? Whether it's an insignificant skill or not, it's meaningless. Why bother deceiving yourself and others? Junior sister Wang Wu, one day, you will shine in 9 regions. Shine in 9 regions? Senior brother, you think too highly of me. I've never overestimated anyone. In my opinion, you're only lacking one thing. Huh? Sense of responsibility. What you lack is a sense of responsibility. For a long time, you've been cultivating alone under the brilliance of other senior brothers and sisters, indifferent to the outside world, and even introverted and autistic. This is not because you lack the ability, but because you don't want to take more responsibility and actively avoid all opportunities to perform. If the golden generation can grow up smoothly, then there would be other people to support everything in Lingjian school, and it would be fine if you want to be good to yourself. But now the situation has changed. There's no pillar around you, so you have to stand up and support it all yourself. I don't have confidence. Wang Wu felt the increasingly turbulent energy pouring into her palm, and the panic and wavering in her heart could no longer be suppressed. Ouyang Shang said, I know you don't, but I won't give you the chance to escape. With that, an unprecedented abundant energy poured into Wang Wu's body. I've given you everything, so you can't escape, right? Wang Wu finally couldn't help but cry out, Big brother, you're too cruel. You know very well that I never wanted your inheritance, never. I just want to cultivate in peace and quietly like someone. How can you be so cruel? If you want to eliminate the Demon King, if you want to revitalize the sect, if you want to save 9 regions, then do it yourself. Why do you want to embarrass me? If you think you're not capable enough, then take everything away from me. If I alone am not enough, there are so many people outside who are willing to sacrifice. Sacrifice can't solve anything, only survival can win. Then you must live. Don't throw everything to me and then sacrifice yourself. Listen. Ouyang Shang grabbed Wang Wu's shoulder and said, Listen, I have my own things to do, and you also have your own things to do. You have to live on happily, for 100 years, 200 years, live on happily. Live happily. Watch you die, but I'm happy. Big brother, don't go too far. Yes, I'm indeed going too far by forcing people to do something they don't want to do. So, I'll give you a reward. In the inconceivable eyes of Wang Wu, Ouyang Shang suddenly leaned over and gently kissed her on the lips. At the same time, Ouyang Shang loosened his hand, and his face was filled with a smile of success. Sorry, because it's my first kiss, the technique may be a bit poor, so if you don't like it, just forget it. How about this, I promise you, as long as you live happily, then I will definitely come to you. Come to me? This kind of promise that deceives a child. Well, although it does sound a bit nonsensical, ask yourself, have I ever deceived you? Yes. Then at least not this time. Ouyang Shang smiled and hugged Wang Wu, believe me this time, I will definitely come back. Then, he let go of his hand and staggered to stand. After passing all his power to Wang Wu, Ouyang Shang was like an empty shell, but soon, the empty shell ignited with new energy, that was his innate vitality. One last thing to do, time is limited, so I won't bid farewell to Feng Yin and the others. Oh right, it probably won't be long before the Wanxian League's reinforcements arrive. At that time, regarding the sects. Forget it, sects exist because of people, as long as you guys are alive, everything will be fine. If you can fight, then fight. If not, then forget it. Remember to take care of yourself. After that, Ouyang Shang burrowed into the ground and disappeared without a trace. Wang Wu stretched out her hand to try to catch his back, but to no avail. Live happily? You bastard, you make it sound so difficult. Wang Wu tried to move her facial muscles to show a smile, but for some reason, every time her muscles trembled, it made her heart ache. After an unknown amount of time, Feng Yin and the others finally realized something was wrong and rushed over, but they only saw Wang Wu, who had wiped away her tears with a smile on her face. Where's eldest senior brother? Feng Yin asked doubtfully. Eldest senior brother? Wang Wu still had a smile on her face. He's probably tired of living and went to die. What nonsense are you talking about? Feng Yin was furious, but then he remembered their relationship, especially the feelings Wang Wu had for Ouyang Shang for so many years. She wouldn't say such cruel words. Junior sister, what's wrong with you? Wang Wu smiled and shrugged. Nothing, I'm fine, just following someone's request to be happy. Happy? Yes, the most important thing for people to live is to be happy, and then let others eat. By the way, eldest senior brother said that it won't be long before the reinforcements from the Wuxia League come. You guys might as well think about how to wrangle with those people. Most of our sect's people have died. Don't be directly removed from the Wuxia League. What? The reinforcements from the Wuxia League? That's what eldest senior brother said. If you don't believe it, then forget it. Wang Wu said and shrugged. I'm going to take a nap. Senior brothers and junior brothers, please help yourself. At the same time, at the foot of a distant volcano, Ouyang Shang saw the Demon King who had been waiting for a long time. A few months ago, on this mountain, a crack that tore the world opened the passage between the two worlds. The elders of Spirit Sword School sacrificed everything to fill the gap. And now, the eldest disciple of Lingjian School returned here, ready for the final battle. Ha ha ha, sorry to keep you waiting. Humph, with the big heart demon oath, I'm not afraid of you running away. It seems that your funeral has been settled, so let's get started. With that, the Demon King stretched out his incomplete left hand, crossed the space, and directly pressed it on Ouyang Shang's forehead. Ouyang Shang's whole body was shocked, but his tone was as calm as ever. If you win, this body will belong to you. You will have the body of a top cultivator, and the current injury will not be worth mentioning. Thus, you will have the capital to continue to plot in 9 regions. And if you lose, your memory will belong to me. I will have the knowledge of an immortal, and from then on, my future will be boundless. And you won't have any chance of winning. The Demon King coldly said and exerted more force on his hand, and a huge force began to pour into his seriously injured body. The layers of primordial spirit defense built by Ouyang Shang collapsed, and it couldn't even delay for a moment. Soon, the consciousness of the Demon King invaded along the open passage. The next moment, the Demon King's anger boiled. You lied to me? Ha ha ha, I'm bound by the Great Heart Demon Oath, how could I dare to lie to you? As long as you win, my body and Jade Mansion will belong to you. I didn't renege on the debt, I just cleaned up the inventory before coming here. When I sold the house, I didn't say that it must be accompanied by furniture and decoration, right? You. Speaking of which, what do you think of my little camouflage skill? Is it acceptable? Go to hell. If you want to die, go to hell yourself. I promised a girl that I would go back to find her. Sorry, I can't accompany you. You can play by yourself. How dare you? Once this battle starts, it will not end until one of us dies. Ha ha ha, I didn't say I would make a truce with you. This is a strategic change. It won't be too late for me to regroup and take your dog life after 100 years. I just don't know if your incomplete soul can hold on for that long, ha ha ha. While speaking, a primordial spirit seemed to want to escape from his swollen body. Don't even think about escaping. The black rope firmly bound the escaping primordial spirit. Hey, don't be so persistent. In any case, your fallen immortal world is full of talented people. Even if you die, there will be more. The primordial spirit kept trying to break free. Although the Demon King refused to let go at all, the power that bound it gradually loosened. Don't try. You waste your strength on breaking through, but I bet all my bets on escaping. You can't stop me. Maybe so. The Demon King said in a deep voice, but don't think you won. As soon as his voice fell, his body that was full of primordial spirit exploded. The self-explosion of his body released an unprecedented terrifying power. The thousands of feet high mountain collapsed at this moment, lava poured out, and the area within a radius of 100 miles was dead silent. The sky changed color, and a faint crack bloomed in the sky again. Then, the world broke and became dark. It's over? In the darkness, Wang Lu shook his head in a daze. After looking at the memories for so long, he felt that his whole body was a little slow. Yes, it's over. What's the evaluation? This is a bad ending, right? Wang Lu shrugged. A big explosion, and then the whole play is over? There are still a lot of things that haven't been explained clearly at all. Big brother, why did you show me this? Because this is an essential review before the award ceremony. Award ceremony? Wang Lu asked doubtfully. However, at this moment, a red dot lit up in the darkness. The Demon King with the right half of his body permanently missing appeared in his field of vision. The Demon King looked tired and weak, no longer as high-spirited as he used to be. And this time, he appeared with a look of relief. You win. As he said that, he handed a round crystal ball in his left hand to Wang Lu. Before Wang Lu could take it, it disappeared. Big Brother's teasing voice sounded behind him. Tsk tisk, it's really not easy for the old guy. His resentment hasn't dissipated even after more than 100 years. Impressive. Wang Lu was silent for a while. He felt that everything he experienced seemed so out of place. He asked the void, was the previous transmigration just a dream? Dream? That wasn't a dream. It was a war, and the result of the war was that you won. I won? Wang Lu felt that the sense of incongruity was getting heavier. I don't remember participating in any gambling activity. The so-called victory should refer to the bet you made with the Demon King 150 years ago, right? The prize for victory is his memory and knowledge as a fallen immortal, but it doesn't make sense. The person who made the bet with him is you, but the person who finally accepted the challenge is me. Does this count? Ouyang Shang said with a smile, 150 years ago, I cheated and took the lead in the gambling fight. However, the Demon King was unyielding, so he self-detonated his body in order to perish together with me. The strong energy coincidentally loosened the corner of the heaven-mending technique and shook my primordial spirit into the void. Can you guess what happened after that? It's not like I transmigrated in the 3,000 worlds, right? At that time, I was lost in the turbulence of time and space for a long time. When I woke up, I found myself in a proletarian country under the rule of the bourgeoisie. Yes, it's really a dreamlike life. There are so many wonderful things in it that it's enough to make people forget about home and home. So, I did hesitate and hesitate. But in 9 regions, I still owe her a promise. Moreover, it's hard for me to let my junior brothers and sisters face danger in 9 regions while I enjoy the comfort of a different world alone. So. Hearing this, Wang Lu's heart was beating wildly. The truth that he was about to face seemed to be beyond the endurance limit of normal people. However, in the dark, Wang Lu kept hearing the voice in the depths of his heart. Have you never wondered where you came from? Have you never wondered where the vague memory of a professional adventurer came from? Have you never wondered if the so-called void spirit root was really a gift from heaven? In confusion, Wang Lu heard Ouyang Shang continue to speak. So I decided to come back. Of course, it's not easy, but I learned a lot of things in the other world. Moreover, by chance, I got the peerless spirit root that was above the fallen immortal. Then, taking advantage of the space shock in the 3,000 worlds, I abandoned most of my memory and primordial spirit power and came back through the space-time crack. While speaking, Ouyang Shang came out of the void. However, what appeared in front of Wang Lu was a face that was exactly the same as his own. You. Wang Lu frowned and stared at the other party. There were thousands of words in his heart. But in the end, he couldn't say a word. After a long time, Wang Lu smiled helplessly. A beautiful gay relationship has turned into self-masturbation. I'm also drunk. Chapter 538. Ah, the sky is so blue, so blue. On the vast expanse of grassland, Wang Lu sat in a large carriage, looked up at the sky, and sighed sincerely at the blue sky. Little brother, is there something bothering you? The old man driving the car asked loudly against the howling wind. Hearing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but be surprised. Huh? Why do you ask? Big brother, you can see it? The driver chuckled. You've sighed more than 20 times today that the sky is so blue. Yes, the sky is really blue. Wang Lu sighed again and then lay down on the carriage, no longer looking at the sky. However, a moment later, he felt impatient. Annoyance came one after another, making him unable to bear it. So, Wang Lu simply moved to the front of the carriage, moved behind the driver, and asked with interest, Big brother, you've been driving in the southern heaven region for so many years, so you must be very knowledgeable. I want to ask you a question. Little brother, please ask. For a distinguished guest who had spent a lot of money to hire him as a driver, the old driver showed a very good sense of service. Wang Lu asked, say, if one day you get drunk and do a lot of stupid things, some good and some bad things, and when you wake up, you forget all those things. Before he finished, the driver laughed, Little brother, you've asked the right person. I've encountered this kind of thing too many times. Every time I leave Hangzhou to go somewhere else, after I come back, I will drink a few cups. Sometimes, when I make a lot of money, I will drink more, and when I wake up the next day at noon, I don't remember anything, haha. Wang Lu smiled and then said, if you do something particularly out of line and have a close relationship with the people around you, what should I do? The driver waved his hand, what else can I do? If I have to admit my mistakes, I have to admit my mistakes. Hey, you're right. Wang Lu shrugged. Little brother. The driver simply began to nag, I see that you're young, have an extraordinary way of talking, and are generous, so you're not from an ordinary family. For a big shot like you, even if you do something wrong, there's still room for redemption. There's really nothing to be afraid of. Look at me. Last year, when I was drunk, I broke a porcelain bottle. I had to pay for 3 years of my savings, but it still wasn't enough. If I hadn't met a kind-hearted person who helped me out, I would be eating food in prison now. However, sometimes, when the matter is too big, you have to be more cautious when facing it. If it really doesn't work, you have to go back on your word when it's time to do so. Wang Lu laughed. Well said. When it's time to go back on your word, go back on your word. The two of them laughed for a while, and Wang Lu gradually began to talk about sex. He asked, let's say you fall in love with someone, and that person is not bad in all aspects, and he's also quite interested in you. So, the two of you decide to marry each other, and you're affectionate, and you even get pregnant. The coachman nodded as he listened, seeming to agree. It seemed that his love life was going well. Then, if one day, you suddenly find out that that person is your long-lost sister, what would you do? As soon as Wang Lu's voice fell, he saw the coachman's whole body trembled, and then he exclaimed in surprise and fear, how did you know? Wang Lu quietly looked at the coachman, and in his heart, 10,000 alpacas galloped wildly. After a long time, Wang Lu faintly said, in short, I don't have any prejudice against this kind of thing. The most important thing for a person is to be happy. To have a beloved person to give you to eat is more important than anything else, right? The coachman's body stiffened, and then he reluctantly swallowed and nodded. So, what happened to you guys? The coachman was silent for a while, and then he sighed. What else can I do? I hid it from my family, gave birth to the child, and then moved out to live a slow life. After a long time, the child grew up, and the rest is still the same. Wang Lu nodded and muttered to himself, child. This is indeed a key factor. It had been some time since Wang Lu returned to 9 regions. On that day, after the longest dream ended, he found himself lying on the grassland of the southern heaven region. It turned out that when he returned to 9 regions from the demon world, he was entangled by the ghost of the fallen immortal demon king and pulled into the dream of the demon king. Later, when the dream was broken, Wang Lu was caught in the turbulence of time and space and thrown into an unknown corner of the southern heaven region. Fortunately, he was not thrown into some dangerous place. After returning to 9 regions, Wang Lu was not in a hurry to return to the sect. He even deliberately used immortal technique to shield his existence. All the props that belonged to the Lingjian school were sealed in his mustard seed bag, including the sword of Mount Kun. After that dream, Wang Lu's hard work was not in vain. On the contrary, his harvest was so huge that he had to take a period of time to digest it carefully. During this period, he didn't want to rush to meet the people from the Lingjian school, because he hadn't figured out how to face them. The simplest way was like this: comrades, I, Ouyang II, am back. Come and kneel down, ha ha ha. The result was probably like this: what are you guys doing? Show some respect. You, it's you, surnamed Feng. I order you to stop immediately. And you, surnamed Lu, don't think that I don't know your dark history. I am. Ah. Then there would probably be one more corpse that died of mental illness on Spirit Sword Mountain. The friendship of the Golden Generation was unquestionable, but it had been more than 100 years. How to face a reincarnated Big Brother was probably a problem for Feng Yin and the others. Continue to let him be the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Mountain? It didn't seem appropriate. Abdicate and give him the position of sect leader? It seemed even more absurd. Moreover, the key to the problem was Wang Wu. Wang Lu didn't know how to face his respected master. After seeing that dark history, Wang Lu's heart could be said to have mixed feelings. There was admiration, there was sympathy, there was that kind of feeling, not to mention the awakening of his previous life's consciousness only allowed Wang Lu to know some things, but he would not inherit Ouyang Shang's memory. Therefore, the farewell kiss, as well as the promise of eternal love, was really a burden. This matter was not only for him, but also for Wang Wu. For her, the memory of more than 100 years ago had probably faded. As for that promise, presumably, she would only hide it at the bottom of her heart. Because people always had to look forward. Those who could not forget the past had no qualification to move forward. At the same time, after so many years, Wang Wu's happy character had long been deeply ingrained and could not be restored. The reason was very simple. More than 100 years ago, when Ouyang Shang said his last words to her, how old was Wang Wu? How old was she now? Most of her life was spent in a happy heart. Her stubborn and introverted character had probably gone with the wind. So, for a happy Wang Wu, if she put on the posture of a former lover, what would the result be? Junior sister, I'm late, not late, not late. Let's consummate our marriage and then share the property, ha ha ha. To be honest, such a scene was not difficult to imagine. At the same time, it was not difficult to predict the development of the future. Scandal, big scandal. A shocking scandal broke out in Lingjian School, one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. The 5th elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall, Wang Wu, and the head disciple of the school, Wang Lu, disregarded ethics and shamelessly committed adultery. When questioned, she actually used the excuse of a former lover, which was the biggest joke in the world. Please see this issue of the news for details. 1 spirit stone for 1 copy. 1 spirit stone for 1 copy. The following is a report from our reporter. Hello everyone. I am Xiao Mei, a reporter from the 9 States News Center in the Blue River region. Regarding the recent uproar of the Lingjian School, I have interviewed the insiders of the Lingjian School. According to the third elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall, who did not want to be named, Wang Wu has always been unruly in the school, which has a bad precedent, so it is not surprising that this scandal has caused. The school has long been dissatisfied with her. It is said that the Heavenly Sword Hall has held many sect leaders' office meetings, and many elders have jointly proposed to punish her, which has received the support of the school. Fifth junior sister, now the public opinion is in an uproar. I think you also know that the matter between you and eldest senior brother. No, Wang Lu actually has a lot of support within the school, but after all, the pressure of public opinion is too great, so you see, sect leader, senior brother, other things are not a big deal, but the problem is that we already have a child. What? When? When you held the sect leader's office meeting that night, I discovered the crisis in time, so I worked with Wang Lu overnight, and finally, we reaped the harvest. You don't want the child in my belly to be born without a father, do you? Hey, this move of yours is too cheap. The most important thing to be a person is to be happy, get lost. These were the thoughts of Wang Lu. At the thought of that kind of life, Wang Lu was disheartened and had no interest in returning to the mountain. Alas, if I knew it would be like this, I wouldn't have gone to the demon world in the first place. It's so troublesome. Wang Lu was lying on his back in the carriage, bored to death. Of course, objectively speaking, although his trip to the demon world and the dream of time travel had brought him countless problems, it was also a big profit. His current entanglement was somewhat of a pretentious act. Not to mention the undigested inheritance of the fallen immortal that was still in his jade mansion, the things left behind by Ouyang Shang in his previous life were quite rich. The simplest one was that after learning about his own life experience, many questions that had puzzled him for a long time were answered. For example, where did the wonderful ideas that lingered in his mind since he was born come from? Including the concept of professional adventurers, bourgeoisie, proletariat. Since his birth, these things had constantly flashed through his mind, and occasionally, he would dream of many wonderful scenes. Hundreds of feet high metal and glass buildings, huge metal machines and puppets. It was a wonder that no corner of 9 regions had ever seen, but it lingered in his mind. At that time, by chance, he heard that there were people in the world who were born with knowledge, and their situation was quite similar to his own. And all of those people had earth-shattering achievements. Coupled with the void spirit root, which made him see and hear different things since he was a child, he had a firm ambition to cultivate immortality. Now that he thought about it, wasn't he a time traveler? Of course, this time traveler was more complicated than his peers. At the same time, it was no wonder that he subconsciously chose Lingjian School, although being close to home was the most important factor. With his self-confidence at that time, the number 1 sect in the world, Shengjing sect, was actually a better choice. These problems seemed insignificant, but for a cultivator, they were an important part of self-awareness. In the future, when he reached Yuanying stage and deity stage, if these problems were not solved, he would inevitably encounter obstacles and even inner demons. Now that all the problems were clear, some of the obstacles on the road of immortal cultivation had been swept away. Secondly, the awakening of the consciousness of his previous life made Wang Lu feel as if a bright light had been lit in his heart. Simply put, there were some clear purposes in life. Before that, his life and immortal cultivation were somewhat muddle-headed. After joining the Spirit Sword sect, although he had done a lot of things, most of them were because of the situation. Simply put, when the problem came, he would go and solve it. When the problem didn't come, he would just honestly cultivate on the mountain. His initiative was not strong. But now, it was different. Fallen immortal. What a big problem. Chapter 539. The second reason to prevent Wang Lu from returning to the sect as soon as possible was the inheritance of the fallen immortal. The crystal ball of light had not been completely absorbed, but Wang Lu had extracted a considerable part of the knowledge from it. The inheritance of the fallen immortal was not as rich as initially expected. The fallen immortal was deceived by Ouyang Shang's trick. After exploding his body, the remaining trace of primordial spirit was restrained by the great heart demon oath and could not be reincarnated. When he met with Wang Lu, there was actually only a layer of dregs left. Were it not for this, in his dreamland, Wang Lu would not have won the decisive battle so easily. Thus, after many tricks, the fruit of victory would naturally be greatly reduced. After more than 100 years of weathering, most of the memory of the fallen immortal had been lost or incomplete, leaving only a small part. Among them, the most valuable was some experience about the dream-building technique. Wang Lu intended to spend some time to study it carefully and strive to master this unique skill of the demon world. There were also 2 or 3 incomplete immortal-level methods. However, for people who came from the 5 uniques of the Wuxia League, the incomplete immortal-level method was of little significance. It only had a certain academic research value. After all, even the complete immortal-level method Stellar Sword was not very attractive to Wang Lu now. Apart from that, the most important thing in the inheritance of the fallen immortal was his memory about the fallen immortal world, tentatively named the world occupied by the fallen immortals. Because most of the memory had been weathered and incomplete, Wang Lu looked vague. He only saw a sea of purgatory fire and countless creatures suffering in pain. It was a scene of hell. On that day, in the dream of the fallen immortal, the crack in the sky was briefly opened, and a large number of cannon fodder creatures poured out. Those cannon fodder were grotesque, murderous and resentful. It was a characteristic that could only be cultivated in absolute torture. The situation in the fallen immortal world could also be seen. If this group of fallen immortals were allowed to rush out of the passage and occupy 9 regions, it would be a disaster. Perhaps it would be worse than the defeat in the Great War of Immortals and Demons. Therefore, at that time, the previous generation of Elders of Spirit Sword sect did not hesitate to seal the crack in the sky, which was really a great merit. No matter how insidious the politics in the Wuxia League were, they had nothing to say. But things didn't end there. The fallen immortal world had never stopped spying on 9 regions. The previous fallen immortal who sneaked into the demon world, who seemed to be called Mr. Fengyu, was just a vanguard, and the main force was still waiting behind. After the death of Mr. Fengyu, the fallen immortal world would not let it go. They would send new people, and they would only be stronger than Mr. Fengyu. Was 9 regions ready to face the next fallen immortal? At least from the current peaceful scene, there was no such thing at all. Let alone the fallen immortal world, even the matter of the devil race had almost been forgotten. Now, except for the immortal race and the devil race, who else could really be familiar with the matters of the devil race? In addition to devoting themselves to cultivation, cultivators wasted their energy on internal strife. If it weren't for the recent emergence of Fengdu in the southern heaven region, which diverted a considerable part of the social contradictions, it was feared that a local war would break out in the Wuxia League to alleviate the contradictions. Of course, things did not need to be too pessimistic. According to the memory of Mr. Fengyu, the passage between the 2 worlds was very difficult to break through. Mr. Fengyu himself spent 2,000 years but failed on the verge of success, so it was not so easy for future generations to inherit his career. At least for the first step, how to send the vanguard into 9 regions again was a big problem. The first vanguard of the fallen immortal world, Mr. Fengyu, could only enter 9 regions through a detour in the demon world. Now that the demon world was basically destroyed, it was not so easy to use the old way to send people over. However, it was just not easy, things were far from being worry-free. From the memory of Mr. Fengyu, Wang Lu learned that after Mr. Fengyu was suppressed by Fenrir, the fallen immortal world had begun to explore a variety of new ways to invade, and several of them had made great progress. Time waited for no man, however. When he wanted to further analyze the content, he found that part of the content was actually encrypted. This Mr. Fengyu, who had been air-dried for 100 years, still had such a strong sense of confidentiality, which caused a lot of trouble for the later generations. Thinking of this, Wang Lu turned over in the carriage with some irritation and said, "Why is the sky so blue?" One day later, the carriage arrived at its destination, Mang Mountain City. This grassland city was backed by Mount Mang and could be regarded as a remote border city. The population of the city was only a few thousand, and even the city wall was sloppy. Fortunately, the people were simple, so it was also a comfortable place. The coachman sent Wang Lu to the city, enthusiastically introduced the local customs of Mang Mountain City, and tried to recommend an inn to him. Along the way, he could see that Wang Lu was from an extraordinary background, so he planned to choose the most expensive inn in the city and get a lot of commission for himself. Unexpectedly, he only talked until his mouth was dry, but there was no sound behind the carriage. The coachman was so angry that when he looked back, he saw that the carriage had long been empty, leaving only a few silver ingots and a few shiny stones. The coachman was at a loss for a moment, and then he was shocked inwardly. He had been driving for many years, so the carriage was like a part of his body. A young man who weighed more than 100 pounds was gone, but he didn't notice any movement at all when he was driving in front of the carriage. But he was experienced and knowledgeable, so he knew that rather than saying he saw a ghost, it was more like meeting an immortal. Thinking of this, the more the coachman thought about it, the more reasonable he felt. If it wasn't an immortal, how could he walk in the daytime and come and go without a trace? Moreover, he didn't seek money or kill anyone along the way, so if it wasn't an immortal, who could it be? He was really lucky this time. That was an immortal. In this small country where he lived, there hadn't been an immortal for many years. Today, he actually met one, although that person's words and actions were all unique, and indeed quite different from ordinary immortals. It was a pity that he didn't talk much with immortals along the way, so he didn't get to absorb more immortal aura. But there were treasures left by immortals in the carriage. The coachman had no intention of using or selling the silver ingots and stones. He wanted to go home and offer them to his house to ward off evil spirits, and then pass them down from generation to generation. With the immortal's blessing, his descendants would presumably be free of worries. Let's not talk about how the coachman imagined the future in his heart. Let's talk about how Wang Lu quietly left the city after entering Mang Mountain City and went directly to Mount Mang. Because he smelled the aura of a cultivator in the city. The strength of the other party was not strong, probably between Shidon Stage and King Pill Stage. However, in this small border city, this kind of cultivation base was enough to become the guardian of the city from generation to generation, which was the standard local bully. The key was that the person's aura was unstable. It seemed that he was injured, and such a cultivator was most sensitive, especially to foreign cultivators. Wang Lu didn't intend to meet this kind of person face to face. He didn't want to waste time arguing with an insignificant native. Moreover, if things got out of hand. This was the southern heaven region, where Plentiful City was located. Even though the population of Lingjian School was not large, there were still a lot of people stationed here. However, Wang Lu didn't intend to greet the people of Lingjian School. Now, he wandered aimlessly in the southern heaven region in order to sort out his thoughts and organize his cultivation base. In the battle with the fallen immortal Feng Yu in the dream, his harvest was comprehensive, the comprehensive improvement of his cultivation base brought by the 3 years of living in gutter oil was real. Now, Wang Lu's cultivation base was at the peak of King Pill Stage, but this kind of peak King Pill Stage that was soaked in gutter oil naturally needed to be squeezed out of the water. Then Wang Lu chose Mount Mang. This mountain, which was more than 1,000 feet high, was regarded as a barren mountain in the map of the immortal cultivation world. Because, although in theory, there were often immortal spirits in the mountains, at least it was easy to become a node of feng shui line. After all, the mountain itself was the product of the violent movement of the Earth's crust. However, Mount Mang was a special case. Not to mention the node of feng shui line, even the feng shui line avoided it. The surrounding spiritual energy was pitifully thin. Therefore, Mount Mang was also called the Blind Mountain by many cultivators in the southern heaven region. However, this kind of place was the best for the current Wang Lu. His king pill had been formed, so his true qi and magical power could grow and multiply endlessly. Moreover, his cultivation base was too high, so he didn't need to use the outside spiritual energy to enhance his cultivation base. In fact, with his void spirit root qualification, it was best to find a place isolated from spiritual energy, so as not to accidentally absorb a large amount of spiritual energy into his body. For Daoist Master King Pill, the mountain was only a step away, but Wang Lu didn't want to expose his identity near Mt Mang, so he walked on foot and spent half a day to reach the peak. Mount Mang was indeed worthy of being called a blind mountain with thin spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Not to mention cultivators, even ordinary creatures were rare. The peak of the mountain was barren with rocks, and there were pitifully few birds, beasts, and even insects. Wang Lu didn't pay attention to it. He directly found a flat stone and sat cross-legged. Then, his primordial spirit sank down from his purple mansion and combined with the king pill, which was so full that it looked like it was about to burst. He urged it to rotate crazily, constantly throwing out the impurities inside the king pill. The power from the black tide was soon squeezed out by Wang Lu's non-phase chaos king pill. Although the size of the king pill was reduced, it made the structure of the king pill more plump and pure. This process lasted for a full 3 days. After 3 days, the king pill in his jade mansion had shrunk by 1/10, and Wang Lu's overall cultivation level had fallen from the peak of king pill to the high level of king pill. However, although his cultivation level had fallen, Wang Lu felt that his strength had not fallen, but instead, it had risen, because the king pill had shrunk, which made it more convenient to use. Chapter 540. As far as the patience of an elite king pill cultivator was concerned, it was common for a closed-door training to last for 3 to 5 years. Wang Lu didn't intend to do it for that long, but he also wanted to live in seclusion in Mount Mang for a few months. At first, he went to explore the demon realm with Xiaofan and the others. Later, Xiaofan and the others returned smoothly, but he was separated on the way back. After that, 5 months had passed in 9 regions. During this period, the news of his separation must have spread throughout the Wuxia League through the mouths of Xiaofan and the others. Now, those who should be anxious must have already been anxious. After the initial excitement, they must prepare for the aftermath. Now, his inheritance might have fallen into someone's hands. Therefore, it was useless to be anxious. It was better to spend a few months to calm down. Unfortunately, Wang Lu only lived in seclusion in the mountain for a total of 5 days before the peace was broken by a sudden change. On this day, Wang Lu was closing his eyes and concentrating on shrinking his dantian. He began to formally study the integration of non-phase and chaos. As a result, just as his mind entered a mysterious state, he heard a harsh laughter coming from the foot of the mountain. Ha ha ha, 10,000 spirits blood pearl, 10,000 spirits blood pearl is finally born, ha ha ha. Wang Lu suddenly woke up from his meditation. This laughter could resound through the mountains, which was naturally the work of a cultivator. He didn't want to deal with cultivators, but what the cultivator said while laughing made him care. 10,000 spirits blood pearl was born. The term million spirits blood pearl had been widely used in the cultivation world for a long time. The earliest million spirits blood pearl was born in the untainted land. It was condensed by powerful figures at the ancestral sorcerer level by refining the blood of tens of thousands of spiritual creatures. Later, people continued to imitate it according to the legends, and the finished products were all kinds of strange. They were all called 10,000 spirits blood pearl, but their effects were very different. The more effective ones were close to the power of immortal treasures, while the less effective ones were just touching the edge of magic treasures. However, no matter what the grade was, this 10,000 spirits blood pearl was mostly an evil thing. Something that needed to be refined with the blood of living beings was not necessarily an evil thing. However, in today's immortal cultivation environment, it was simply a joke to expect cultivators to collect the blood of living beings in a peaceful way. Nowadays, the million spirits blood pearls circulating in the cultivation world were basically not decent. But now, this laughter was filled with unbridled murderous intent. A bloody smell soared into the sky, reaching the top of the mountain. Wang Lu could naturally guess what had happened down there. TSK, at that time, he was distracted and inadvertently made a mistake. The Shidon stage cultivator in Mtimang City was not a guardian at all, but a fierce evil cultivator. The reason why he came to Laoshan City was to refine the million spirits blood pearl with the lives of thousands of mortals in the city. Damn it, I can't even find a secluded place to cultivate? Why is the sky so blue? With Wang Lu's current mood, he didn't really care about the tragedy at the foot of Pyrolite Mountain. The so-called principle of immortals and mortals walking different paths had long been imprinted on him, the enlightened King Pill. 9 regions was so big, and there were hundreds of millions of mortals. Killing and torture happened all the time. Even if he had great ability, it was impossible for him to take care of them all. Moreover, the things that happened here would be dealt with by the Wanxian League. As an outsider, there was no need for him to intervene. However, the evil cultivator in Mtimang City had made such a big move this time, especially when he openly revealed the name of the million spirits blood pearl, as if he was afraid that others wouldn't know that he was courting death. So, it wouldn't be long before the commissioner of the local sect came. They might not be able to stop the evil cultivator who refined the blood pearl in time, but when they came, Wang Lu wouldn't be able to stay on the top of Pyrolite Mountain anymore. Even more pessimistically, the traces he left on the top of the mountain might be discovered, and then his whereabouts would be exposed. In less than 3 days, he would be dragged back to the mountain by an old woman who lacked moral integrity for more than 100 years to bow to the heaven and earth and get married. They would have sex every day and night, so that they could give birth to a noble son early, and the mother would become noble because of her son. Thinking of this, Wang Lu's whole body trembled, and he quickly began to clean up the traces. However, for cultivators who were good at divination and above, it was difficult to clean up the traces, so he just did his best. At the same time, he directly used his primordial spirit to sweep down, intending to leave a mark on the evil cultivator. That guy had ruined his plan, so he wouldn't let it go so easily. If he didn't beat the sh*t out of him, he wouldn't be able to think clearly. As a result, when his primordial spirit swept down, he saw something unexpected. Mtimang City had now been massacred by the evil cultivator. Broken tiles and ruins were everywhere, and the fire was soaring to the sky. At the door of an inn next to the former main road of Mtimang City, a man who was about 40 or 50 years old fell to the ground with his head tilted. There was a huge hole in his chest, and the blood had already coagulated. His heart in his chest was cruelly pulled out and thrown aside. The man's hands fell to the ground, and a few silver ingots reflected the fire in his palms, looking gloomy. "How come it's you?" That man was the coachman who sent him to Mtimang City 5 days ago. Unexpectedly, he stayed in a remote place like Mtimang City for 5 days and got into a big trouble. Wang Lu sighed secretly. He and this coachman were fated. The conversation in the carriage couldn't be said to be enlightening, but it slightly relieved his worries. Therefore, that day, he gave the coachman silver ingots and spirit stones to end this fate. In the end, it seemed that the coachman suddenly got a huge sum of money and began to forget himself. He went out alone and made a fortune, so it was normal for him to want to do something in this small city. However, the result was, thinking of this, Wang Lu was not in a hurry to clean up the traces. He jumped down from the top of the mountain. His escape technique was mediocre, and the blessings of Mother Earth, Ouyang Shang in his previous life, were not brought to this life. However, he was the first disciple of the 5 uniques, and his attainments in immortal spells were not bad. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of the dead coachman in Empty Mang's city. Wang Lu lit a fire in his hand and was ready to reincarnate for the coachman. However, when he saw the silver ingots in the coachman's hand, he suddenly thought of something. Where did the spirit stones that were given to him that day go? Although the spirit stones were not rare treasures, they were also valuable in the mortal world. Could it be that he could not wait to get rid of the spirit stones? No, those ingots of silver were not small change. If he wanted to live freely in the city, 1 ingot was more than enough. The coachman was also a man with a family and a career, so he would not do things recklessly like young people. Thinking of this, Wang Lu simply used the soul summoning skill to collect some of the remnants of the coachman's soul. The main soul had been refined into the million spirits blood pearl. Although the remnant soul was incomplete, it happened to remember some images of the last few days before his death. Wang Lu restored it with magic. Tian Laosan, how come I see you again today? This Black Pine House is a first-class restaurant in Empty Mang City, but you come here every day these days. Are you trying to murder me for money? In the restaurant, a middle-aged man dressed in luxurious clothes greeted him with a slight smile. Tian Laosan laughed and scolded, "Bah! You're the one trying to murder me for money. I'm so lucky that I met a benefactor." "You, Tian Laosan, can also meet a benefactor?" "Humph, believe it or not, you will be envious in a few days. Waiter, bring the dishes from yesterday to the table again." In the pink house, they were leaning against each other, beautiful and charming. "Master Tian, I heard from my sisters that you've made a fortune recently." Tian Laosan, who was already drunk, laughed and said, "Humph, a fortune. I don't care about making a fortune anymore. I've been having a good time in the city these days, spending all my private money. Because this time, I'm so lucky and met an immortal fate." The girls looked at him curiously. Immortal fate? Tian Laosan couldn't keep it a secret, and he knew that the girls in the drunken immortal house loved these strange stories. He took out the silver ingots and spirit stones to show off. "I met an immortal, ha ha ha." However, the next moment, the door opened, and a gust of chilly wind blew in. Riding the chilly wind, a young man broke into the room. He was wearing a black robe with hundreds of red dots printed on it. He stared at the spirit stones in Tian Laosan's hand and asked coldly, "An immortal?" Tian Laosan was stunned and then became furious. Who are you? Who let you in? Get out." The young man said coldly, "I'll ask you again. You said you met an immortal. Is it an immortal like me?" The next moment, the black robe moved, and a red dot flew out and turned into a bloody skeleton in the air. It bit off half of a girl's body. Blood and intestines flowed all over the ground. Tian Laosan was scared out of his wits. "Ah, please spare me, please spare me." The young man ignored him and grabbed the spirit stones. He played with them in his hand and frowned. Then, his eyes became ferocious. "It's really the spirit stones of the Wuxia League. You've chased me all the way here and won't stop. Fine, since you're so aggressive, don't blame me for being desperate. Million spirits blood pearl, rise." Then, the image could no longer be read. Wang Lu dispersed the remnant soul and sighed. This Tian Laosan was really unlucky to encounter this kind of misfortune. The young man in the black robe was most likely a cultivator who was being chased and ran to Empty Mang City to hide and wait for an opportunity to heal. Empty Mang was a place where the Reiki of heaven and earth was exhausted, and almost no cultivators came here. It was even more difficult for the pursuers to expect an injured person to hide in a place lacking Reiki, so he chose a good place. However, after Tian Laosan entered the city with his adventure, because he couldn't control his mouth, the news of the immortal fate gradually spread, which shocked the evil cultivator who fled here. No cultivators had come to Empty Mang's city for many years. Not long after he was chased here, another person came. It was hard to believe that this was a coincidence. However, mortals were so ignorant that they might not have really met a cultivator. Maybe they were just dreaming after drinking too much. So, he secretly watched Tian Laosan. In his drunken stupor, he took out a few high-quality round spirit stones. Then, in desperation, Empty Mang's city was destroyed. Wang Lu shook his head. Tian Laosan died unjustly, and so did all the people in the city. The evil cultivator didn't want to do that at first, but he was stimulated. And the source of the stimulation was none other than, of course, Wang Lu was not a saint. Although this disaster was caused by him, he had no responsibility at all. But if he just left like this, well, I'll waste a little time to get rid of the evil for the people. At this point, Wang Lu no longer concealed his aura. A sharp sword chi soared into the sky, directly breaking the bloody sky that covered the whole city. Who is it? The blood curtain of the million spirits' blood pearl was broken, and the evil cultivator trembled violently, horrified. Wang Lu replied coldly, an immortal. Chapter 541. In the sky above Empty Mang's city, the black-robed cultivator looked at the sword cultivator who suddenly appeared in front of him in confusion. He originally thought that the cultivator who quietly entered Empty Mang's city was a cultivator of the Wuxia League who secretly chased him. Unexpectedly, the one who was stimulated by the 10,000 spirits blood bead was a stranger. Moreover, the devil chi on his body was soaring to the sky, which meant that he was most likely an evil cultivator. There was nothing more unfortunate than this in the world. He was ready to do something desperate and did not hesitate to slaughter the entire city. Nearly 10,000 people in Empty Mang's city were killed by the evil method, and for a time, the resentment soared to the sky. This kind of thing could not be hidden from others. It was estimated that in less than 3 days, in addition to the several young cultivators of the Wuxia League who chased him, even the elders would jump out to kill the evil. The genius disciple of the blood-refining sect, Zheng Liming, most likely would not be able to wait for the day when he would be able to move unhindered in the 9 regions. As the saying goes, a cornered dog would do something desperate. This was an act of drinking poison to quench thirst. However, unexpectedly, after drinking the poison, he found that his mouth was even drier. You? Who the hell are you? Zheng Liming was dismayed. He just wanted to know who this fellow cultivator who made him destroy his own future was. Immortal. Immortal? Zheng Liming was stunned for a long time, and then he felt even more unlucky. He didn't expect that the person who made him break out in a cold sweat was actually a madman. The path of immortal cultivation was full of thorns. There were countless people who were entangled by the devil in their heart and became delirious, thinking that they had become immortals. This kind of person's behavior was disordered and there was no rule to speak of. Zheng Liming was irritated for a while, and his killing intent gradually rose. The evil cultivators had no scruples in doing things, so the so-called friendship of fellow cultivators was, of course, just a joke. Although the realm of this madman seemed to be quite good, middle-level King Pill. However, he came from a famous sect, had a deep foundation, and had the newly refined 10,000 spirits blood bead. Even if he was a middle-level King Pill, he might not necessarily lose. In addition, the strength of this kind of cultivator entangled by the devil in his heart would probably be reduced, so there was no need to be afraid of him. What was more, once he killed this kind of cultivator with high cultivation base, it would be an excellent tonic. If he could refine a Taoist master of Jindan stage into his 10,000 spirit blood pearl, his strength would double. At that time, not to mention the several cultivators of the Union of 10,000 Immortals. Even if the elders came, unless they were Yuanying stage-old monsters, he would still have a way to escape. With this thought in mind, Zheng Liming decided to make the first move. With a flick of his black robe, hundreds of blood skeletons shot out like raindrops. At the same time, he held the Million Spirits blood pearl in his hand, waiting for an opportunity. After all, his opponent was a perfected master in the elixir realm, so he didn't dare to be careless. Although the Million Spirits blood pearl was powerful, he only had one chance to challenge someone of a higher level. If he missed, he would die. On the other side, Wang Lu didn't care about Zheng Liming's bloody skeletons at all. With his current strength, even if he didn't use any magical power, he could still resist the impact of these bloody skeletons with his body alone. If he used his primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi, he would be able to scatter that evil cultivator's soul. Since Wang Lu's debut, he had always been challenging others, or even more than one level. How could it be someone else's turn to challenge him? It was just that, now the situation was different. Wang Lu didn't want to show his real ability. Whether it was primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi or non-phase method, they had a small reputation in the current Wanxian League. To be honest, it was quite surprising that the evil cultivator in front of him didn't recognize him, the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect. Once he used his signature skill, the trace was obvious, but he didn't want to expose his whereabouts so simply. Therefore, he could only use some of his signature skills. It just so happened that there were quite a few unorthodox methods in Mr. Feng Yu's legacy. Although they were not qualified to replace primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi and non-phase method, they could be used as a useful supplement to the system of methods. Wang Lu had previously read them when he was shrinking his dantian, so at this time, he could use them. The methods in the legacy of the fallen immortal were mixed. There were righteous methods and evil methods. Previously, Wang Lu used an evil sword technique called Bone Transformation Sword to break through the blood curtain of the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl. At this time, facing the bloody skeletons that were like raindrops, he remembered that there was a demonic method called Blood Drinking Seclusion, which was a special blood method. Thus, he casually used it, and the more than 100 bloody skeletons immediately vanished into thin air. Wang Lu smiled and thought that although there were few top-notch goods in the legacy of the fallen immortal, these unorthodox methods were really interesting. If used at the right time, they would not belong to those immortal-level methods. By using these things in a comprehensive way, his adaptability could be improved. The legacy of the fallen immortal was really extraordinary. He had previously underestimated the value of these things. On the other side, Zheng Liming was simply scared out of his wits. Just now, the more than 100 bloody skeletons were connected to his original method. Although they were not as overbearing as the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl, he was confident that even Daoist Master King Pill would find it difficult to face them head-on. However, unexpectedly, the other party casually waved his hand and turned the skeletons into ashes. How could he face such an opponent head-on? Not to mention the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl, even if he had the blood-drinking river diagram, the most precious treasure of the blood-refining sect, he would still not be his opponent. Therefore, Zheng Liming immediately thought of retreating. However, even if he wanted to leave, Wang Lu did not want to let him go. More than 100 bone transformation swords formed a bone cage to stop Zheng Liming. Zheng Liming backhanded his hand and shot out the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl. A round red bead flew like a meteor. Tens of thousands of wronged souls lingered around the blood bead, strengthening its momentum. The 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl was indeed worthy of being the most precious treasure of the Devil Path. Before its body arrived, the bloody aura of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood had already rushed over, constantly interfering with the cultivator's primordial spirit jade mansion. Wang Lu did not hesitate. He directly took out his jade mansion and spat out the king pill, which collided with the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl. This unyielding move shocked Zheng Liming for a full breath of time in midair. The opportunity to escape that he had fought for by sacrificing the 10,000 spirit blood pearl had slipped away. It wasn't that Zheng Liming was too stupid, it was just that this move was too bizarre. It must be known that a golden core cultivator's golden core could be said to be the lifeblood of a cultivator. Once it was damaged, their cultivation in the immortal Tao would go down the drain. Ordinary people would not even have enough time to protect it, let alone use it as a hidden weapon. Even if a monster spat out its Niden, it would only be used when it was desperate. Wang Lu's move simply refreshed Zheng Liming's worldview. The next moment, Zheng Liming's eyes, which had been opened to the limit, widened even more, and his eyeballs almost popped out of his eye sockets. Because right in front of him, the 10,000 spirit blood pearl was broken into pieces after being penetrated by the king pill. Is this the king pill or a hidden weapon? How could there be such a sharp king pill in the world? In addition to the shock, Zheng Liming also felt hopeless. His opponent was far more powerful than he had imagined, and even the million spirits blood pearl had been destroyed. It could be said that he was doomed. Really, if he had known this, why did he care about what the coachman said? Wouldn't it be better to recuperate and then find a way to escape back to the sect? Now he was really seeking his own death. On the other side, Wang Lu also felt bored after making a successful move. After all, the opponent was too weak. The result of the whole process was that he basically gained nothing except for one skill proficiency. The only thing worth mentioning was that after the king pill collided with the 10,000 spirit blood pearl, the violent shock made the two cultivation methods in the king pill further fuse. Although the degree of fusion was not high, it opened up a new idea for Wang Lu. If there was a chance in the future, he might as well use the king pill to collide with something hard to see if it could further promote the fusion. While thinking about it, Wang Lu prepared the transformation bone sword to give Zheng Liming the final blow. After killing this evil cultivator whose hands were stained with blood, it would be his turn to run. In the short battle just now, he did not use any skills related to the Lingjian school. Unless the divination masters tried their best, they should not be able to figure out his origin. As long as Zheng Liming died, he believed that no one would be so bored to find out who killed him. In the area under the jurisdiction of the Wuxia League, everyone had the right to kill evil spirits. However, when Wang Lu pulled out his forearm bone and turned it into a pale bone sword, ready to cut off Zheng Liming's head, suddenly a starlight fell from the sky and fell directly on Zheng Liming's head. The starlight fell so fast that even Wang Lu was a little unprepared. He felt dizzy, and then he saw Zheng Liming's head flying high and blood splashing in the sky. Wang Lu was taken aback. This starlight descent was clearly an exceptionally powerful flying sword technique. Before he could react, that flying sword had already beheaded Zheng Liming. At that time, although Zheng Liming had somewhat abandoned himself to despair, his protective demonic method had yet to disperse, and the magical treasure-level blood corpse robe was still loyally protecting its master. As a result, when the sword light fell, the demonic skill and the robe all disintegrated. Zheng Liming's body was cut, and even his primordial spirit couldn't escape. In the blink of an eye, both his body and spirit were destroyed. This sword was strange and sharp, not inferior to Wang Lu's primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi. The purity of the sword intent seemed to be above Wang Lu's. After all, Wang Lu was good at both offense and defense, so the pure sword intent in full attack mode was still a bit worse. Wang Lu didn't think that he was invincible in the world. Right now, he was merely in the king pill stage. There were countless sword cultivators in 9 regions who were more powerful than him, but there were not too many who could make that sword strike just now. And in his impression, with a slight tremble, Wang Lu saw a figure flash in front of him. A rainbow-like gorgeous figure of a girl appeared behind Zheng Liming's body, holding a starlight immortal sword that had just been washed clean of blood. The girl had delicate long hair, a bright and picturesque face, and a pair of sparkling eyes filled with endless curiosity about everything in the world. Seeing this face, Wang Lu almost fainted. He had calculated every possible way not to expose himself, especially not to be discovered by his fellow sect members. Unexpectedly, the person in front of him was someone he had been familiar with for many years. "Senior brother Wang Lu, how come it's you?" The girl named Lu Li blinked her eyes in disbelief at first, and then with a cheer, she threw herself at him like a swallow flying into the forest. Wang Lu's heart tightened. He immediately dodged backward and then pretended that he didn't know her. Men and women should not touch each other. "Benefactor, please show some respect." "Huh?" Lu Li curiously tilted her head, looked at Wang Lu, and then raised her head to think seriously. Finally, the girl clapped her hands and suddenly realized something. Then, Lu Li meticulously gave Wang Lu a salute and righteously said, "Lu Li pays respect to senior brother Wang Lu." "Hey, I don't want this kind of respect from you." Wang Lu said, "I think you probably mistook me for someone else." "Huh?" Lu Li looked incredulous as she covered her mouth, completely unable to accept the reality. Wang Lu coughed. "Perhaps I look similar to your senior brother. But as the saying goes, there must be 3 people with the same appearance in this world. So, you actually mistook me for someone else. My surname is Xiaofan, and I'm a loose cultivator from the southern heaven region." Lu Li was stunned, and then, as if suddenly enlightened, she nodded and cautiously came closer. "I know, senior brother, you're carrying out a secret mission, right? Lu Li will keep it a secret. Rest assured." Secret. Counting on Lu Li to keep it a secret was second only to counting on Wang Wu to be an upright person. Wang Lu sighed and casually asked, "If someone asks you who you saw in busy mountain town, how would you answer?" "Secret." "What secret?" "A secret that can't be told." Wang Lu raised his eyebrows. "Not bad, I haven't seen you for several months, and you've made progress. Alright, let's exchange moves." "Liu Li, keeping a secret is a very important and difficult thing. I'm afraid you can't do it alone. I'm willing to help you keep the secret." "Alright. But you have to tell me what the secret is first, then I can help you keep it." "Oh. The secret is that I've seen senior brother Wang Lu. You mustn't tell anyone." Wang Lu sneered helplessly. After all, she was Lu Li. Chapter 542. Lu Li's problem was really difficult to solve. Because of some reasons that were inconvenient to be pointed out directly out of politeness, it was simply a fantasy to expect this child to keep the secret. Wang Lu had trained her for many years, and at present, there was only one way that could make Lu Li keep the secret. Silence the witness. Of course, this trick was not feasible at all. No matter how crazy Wang Lu was, it was impossible for him to lay his hands on little Lu Li. However, he couldn't just leave her alone. Otherwise, it wouldn't be long before the entire Lingjian school knew that he had come back. And he was not ready to go back to the mountain. The problem seemed to be in a deadlock, but if the problem could not be solved in a positive way, the reverse solution would also be the same. Since Lu Li could not keep the secret, then Lu Li would also become a part of the secret. In short, wouldn't it be fine as long as Lu Li didn't return to the mountain? However, before that, he had to figure out why Lu Li came to Empty Meng's city. "Master asked me to come." "Uncle Zhou Ming? What did he ask you to come for?" Lu Li took out a piece of paper and read it word by word: "Slay the demon, uphold justice, and contribute to the development of the just cause of Wanxian League." "What did he tell you in private?" Lu Li said with a smile, "He told me to hunt down a cultivator of blood refining sect, and then take his token back to Plentiful City to receive the reward as my experiential learning." "Oh, bounty hunter?" Wang Lu immediately understood. This was the bounty hunting order issued by the Plentiful City Management Committee. Since the rise of Plentiful City, the Southern Heaven region could be said to be a gathering of winds and clouds, dragons and snakes mixed together. Needless to say, super sects like Xingjing sect and Lingjian school, even some cultivators from lower-rank sects had come to the Southern Heaven region to look for gold. However, with more people came more trouble. Many evil cultivators took the opportunity to fish in troubled waters and stir up trouble. This young cultivator from blood-refining sect was one of them. Nowadays, although righteous cultivators were the mainstream in 9 regions, the number of evil cultivators was also quite large. Although the upper echelons of Plentiful City's management committee were powerful, it was impossible for them to take care of everything. Therefore, the usual way to deal with evil cultivators around Plentiful City was to issue bounty hunting orders and hire civilian experts with a high reward to hunt them down. In any case, although Plentiful City's human resources were tight, it never lacked money. As soon as the bounty hunting order was issued, many lively civilian organizations sprang up like bamboo shoots after a spring rain. Yes, last month, they just held a gathering and went to the non-phase peak to lay a wreath for you. Lay a wreath? Lu Li nodded. Yes, there are also a lot of magical tools, magical treasures, spirit stones, and so on. They said that it's used to express their grief. The more precious the gift, the more sincere the grief. That day, I also went and brought you a bag of flying red clouds candy. Really loyal. Knowing that flying red cloud candy bun was Lu Li's favorite food in recent times, Wang Lu touched Lu Li's head, which made the girl particularly pleased. He then asked, "Is this my master's idea?" "Yes, it was proposed by Fifth Aunt. She said that you're the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect, so everyone should express their gratitude." Although I didn't quite understand what she meant, after she proposed it, the atmosphere on the mountain became heavy for several days. Wang Lu sneered. "Wang Wu, don't let me catch you when I go back." However, on the other hand, since Wang Wu, that scoundrel, had the leisure to do this kind of thing, she probably really believed that nothing would happen to him. Speaking of which, the trust between master and disciple was really touching. Very well, in short, basically, nothing big happened in the sect, so it's not bad. Next. Wang Lu touched Lu Li's head again. "Do you want to play with me for 2 days?" Okay. Lu Li was elated and then summoned her flying sword. "How do you want to play?" In the past, when they were on the mountain, the most common entertainment for the two was sword fight. Because until Wang Lu advanced to the King Pill, his and Lu Li's cultivation base was almost the same, and the gap in their comprehensive strength was also negligible. It could be said that they were evenly matched, and after every sword fight, they benefited a lot from each other. Now, although Wang Lu had a fortuitous encounter to advance to the King Pill first, so his strength was one step ahead, but that sword fight also showed that during this period of time, Lu Li's cultivation base had also advanced by leaps and bounds, so she wasn't left too far behind and was still at the same level as Wang Lu. Wang Lu's heart was moved, secretly thinking that sword fight with Lu Li was actually a good idea. Right now, whether it was shrinking or fusing, actual combat experience was an excellent catalyst. Especially since Lu Li's brilliant sword heart sword intent was even purer than his, it was the most suitable to temper himself in actual combat. However, just as Wang Lu was about to nod his head, suddenly, the King Pill in his jade mansion trembled, as if it had a vague reaction with something. A moment later, a flash of light flew over from the horizon like lightning. A long-haired elegant sword cultivator floated down, and as soon as he landed, he cupped his hands in salute. "I am Qi Xianying, disciple of Red Pine Mountain's reaching Firmament Palace. Greetings, fellow Taoist." Wang Lu looked at him, but he didn't hurry to return the salute. Instead, there was a bit of banter in his eyes. The Red Pine Mountains Reaching Firmament Palace was a famous high-rank sect in 9 regions, second only to the 5 uniques. Its headquarters was located in the Southern Heaven region, but it had branches in other regions. Its influence in the entire continent was even above that of Lingjian School. And Qi Xianying was the current lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace. He had been cultivating for 50 years, and his cultivation base was at the peak of King Pill, which could be said to be powerful. Under the tacit approval of his sect, he had managed a considerable force, which was quite famous in the Southern Heaven region. Therefore, many people no longer regarded him as a disciple, but as a local tyrant. A year ago, when he met with the lead disciple of Xingjing sect, Qianghua, he was neither servile nor overbearing, and even had a pleasant conversation. After that conversation, Qi Xianying's reputation became even more prominent, so much so that even Wang Lu had heard of his name. However, this was actually not the point. Let alone a mere lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace, even if Qianghua herself was here, Wang Lu was too lazy to even look at her. It was really the purpose of this Qi Xianying's visit that made Wang Lu feel a little ridiculous. Because it was ridiculous, he unceremoniously laughed. This laughter made Qi Xianying somewhat inexplicable and somewhat annoyed. In his opinion, his manners were already there, but the lead disciple of Lingjian School was unexpectedly rude. "Fellow Daoist, you," Wang Lu unceremoniously interrupted him, "don't pretend. What are you thinking? Do you think I can't see through it? This empty Mang is the famous Blind Mountain, and it has been many years since a cultivator came here. Zheng Liming came here specifically to escape. I am just taking things as they come. Lu Li is here for Zheng Liming, and you, what are you doing here?" Qi Xianying frowned and opened his mouth. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted. "You are the lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace, so you don't have the time to come here for an outing. Zheng Liming is just a +6 peak Shudan, far from being qualified for you, a +8 peak King Pill. So, don't tell me you came here for me." Upon hearing this, Qi Xianying finally understood the meaning of Wang Lu's words. Thinking of the consistent and almost unreasonable strong style of this lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect, he could only sigh. "Yes, I did come here for junior sister Lu Li." Wang Lu nodded. "Then you can go now." Qi Xianying somewhat incredulously stared at Wang Lu, but found that the other party's eyes were unusually calm and seemed to be serious. Suppressing the anger in his heart, Qi Xianying said, "There's probably some misunderstanding here. Wang Lu sneered, "You're just doing your duty as a host, willing to lead the way for your junior sister, but in reality, you're just an idiot. My Lu Li has only been cultivating for more than 20 years, in our immortal cultivation world. She's not even a budding lowly. You, an uncle who has been cultivating for 50 years, better not think too much." Having said this, it was no different from shedding all pretense of cordiality, but Qi Xianying still maintained his self-restraint and said, As a result, he was interrupted before he could finish. He saw Wang Lu reach out his hand and touch Lu Li's head. "Take a bath and go to sleep, lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace. This cabbage has long been mine." Chapter 543. Facing Wang Lu, Qi Xianying felt an unprecedented irritation. He had been cultivating for 50 years and had seen all kinds of people. Even the aloof Qianghua fairy could talk and laugh with him, but he had never seen a person like Wang Lu. No wonder in the circle, Wang Lu's reputation was the most controversial. However, this was not necessarily a bad opportunity. The meeting between the lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace and the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect would certainly attract a lot of attention in the Wanxian League. At that time, the performance of both sides would be seen by others. One side was crafty and rude, while the other side was courteous. The difference between them was obvious. Qi Xianying would not deliberately use others to build his own influence, but if he could conveniently do it, he would never refuse. Living in the shadow of the 5 uniques, a top-rank sect must have its own way of survival. I think. In the face of Wang Lu's aggressive attitude, Qi Xianying stabilized his footing and was ready to insist that all this was a misunderstanding. However, when his eyes fell on Lu Li's contented face, which was touched by Wang Lu, his heart was moved. Misunderstanding? Hey, in Plentiful City, people with discerning eyes would know that this was not a misunderstanding. A few months ago, when I met Lu Li in Plentiful City, I was amazed by her. This matter was almost known to everyone in the circle. If I insist that it was a misunderstanding again and again, it would be nothing more than deceiving myself. Moreover, wouldn't that mean that in front of the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, the lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace wouldn't even have the courage to tell the truth? It's not like it's something immoral. Both of us are free. I, Qi Xianying, am pursuing her openly. What's so shameful about it? At this time, even if I tell the truth, so what? You, Wang Lu, are just her senior brother, not her Taoist companion. How could you care that much? Therefore, Qi Xianying calmed his eyes and said with a smile, junior sister Lu Li is innocent and kind, and her grace is outstanding. I do love her. I'm not interested in what you think. Wang Lu interrupted, Lu Li has already been contracted by me, you go find other people to love her. Your Excellency really likes to joke, people are not goods, just because you say contracted. Wang Lu sneered and said, so what if I'm contracted? You can sue me. Qi Xianying said, don't you think that such a declaration is too domineering and doesn't respect the subjective will of the parties involved? Subjective will? What a joke. Wang Lu shook his head and then asked Lu Li, tell me, in your opinion, what kind of character is this Qi Xianying? Lu Li turned around and looked at Qi Xianying. The latter smiled and nodded in a generous manner. Senior brother Qi is a good person. Wang Lu laughed and said, did you hear that? Keep the good guy card and leave. With that, Wang Lu glanced at him as if he was looking at an idiot, then pulled Lu Li's hand and turned around to leave. This. Qi Xianying refused to give up. In fact, he was somewhat encouraged. He didn't have a long contact with Lu Li, but she was a good person. Obviously, it meant that he had left a good impression on her, and if it could continue to develop. Of course, with Wang Lu around, things would not go so smoothly, which he had expected a few months ago. At that time, the news of the disappearance of the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect had just spread in the circle, and it just so happened that he began to try to get in touch with Lu Li. Thus, someone around him said that if he made a move against Lu Li at this time, he would be suspected of taking advantage of her. However, Qi Xianying retorted that not only did Wang Lu and Lu Li not have a marriage agreement, they didn't even have any love between man and woman. Even if Wang Lu was still there, he didn't avoid it, so he couldn't take advantage of her. Having said that, in fact, Qi Xianying had already expected that if Wang Lu really disappeared, then that would be fine. But once he came back, he would inevitably become an obstacle in front of Lu Li. He and Lu Li were indeed not in a romantic relationship, at least not yet. According to his private understanding from the people of Beast Master School, the relationship between the two was more like a master-servant relationship. But in fact, this kind of relationship was even worse. Qi Xianying had cultivated for 50 years, and he had seen too many emotional things. Most of the obstacles did not come from the two people who loved each other, but from the family behind the two people. And no matter how he looked at it, Wang Lu's performance was like a tricky and unreasonable mother-in-law. Seeing that Wang Lu was about to take Lu Li away, Qi Xianying hurriedly shouted, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." Although this move was reckless, it was also Qi Xianying's last resort. If he really let Wang Lu go like this, he would never see Lu Li again. In his 50 years of cultivation, this was the first time that he was moved by a woman. If things were to go down the drain like this, perhaps it would form a heart demon that could not be dispelled for decades. Therefore, even if it would make Wang Lu feel disgusted, he couldn't care less. Who knew that Wang Lu's reaction was bigger than he expected? He did stop, but when he turned his head, a sharp sword qi that shook Qi Xianying's primordial spirit came at him. At this moment, Qi Xianying's strength as the lead disciple of reaching Firmament Palace fully erupted. Purple qi lingered in his jade mansion, and the king pill that had been tempered to its peak state was fully sublimated under the brewing of the purple qi, condensing into an indeterminate little person. Once the human form was formed, all of Qi Xianying's magical power was activated. An immortal aura filled his whole body, and the surrounding spiritual energy was fully activated. This was impressively a Yuanying stage-level magical ability. Using the King Pill stage to drive the Yuanying stage-level magical ability, Qi Xianying's strength was fully displayed. Although this kind of cross-stage magical ability could only be used for a moment and could only be used once, it was often this one move that could determine the outcome of the battle. However, in the face of the sword qi that came at him, Qi Xianying didn't even dare to think about the outcome of the battle. At the last moment, he only had enough time to turn his Yuanying stage-level immortal aura into a sparkling and translucent red pine tree in front of him. That was not only the life source spiritual treasure given to him by the master of reaching Firmament Palace, who was also his master, but also the supreme magical ability of the Yuanying stage immortal spirit transformation. The next moment, the sword qi erupted, and the red pine tree violently trembled. Tens of thousands of pine needles fell down like a rainstorm. The straight trunk was pressed inward, and the branches were torn apart, as if they were about to break. Before this spirit tree had the time to display more of its magical ability, most of its magical ability had already been dispelled. As for Qi Xianying himself, he felt a huge shock in his jade mansion. His newly condensed Yuanying collapsed and scattered, turning into a mass of violent purple gas that rampaged inside his body. He had to use all of his strength to barely suppress it. However, at least, it was blocked. On the other side, Wang Lu was also surprised. His primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi was actually blocked. This was somewhat unexpected. It must be known that just now, he didn't use his finger as a sword, nor did he use the sword of Mount Kun as a medium. Instead, he casually pulled out Lu Li's sword, Skybreaker, which was also the weapon that the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi should go with. Its power was more than twice as strong as its normal state. Let alone a mere peak king pill, even if it was a valuable low-level Yuanying, it would still be cut down by this sword strike. Of course, in view of the side effect of the weapon, Wang Lu immediately returned the sword to Lu Li. Moreover, that sword strike just now also made him feel that his jade mansion was empty, which was difficult to reappear in a short period of time. Not bad, you have a bit of skill. Wang Lu nodded and retracted his primal chaos sword qi. He didn't take advantage of the opponent's absent-minded primordial spirit to hit him while he was down. As a matter of fact, from the beginning, he didn't have much opinion on Qi Xianying. The charm of Lu Li, this healing angel, was beyond doubt. It was normal for people to fall in love with her. Qi Xianying was just one of the braver ones. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, there was no big problem in etiquette. Although there was a big gap between him and Lu Li in terms of cultivation age, with Lu Li's peerless aptitude. Most of the people with similar cultivation time as her were still far away from Shudan stage. How could this kind of noob afford to climb up to her? It was too far-fetched to use age as a limit. It was just that, when he spoke just now, Wang Lu's mood was extremely bad. When he came back from the demon world, his heart was full of heaviness. He intended to dispel his irritation through cultivation, but as soon as he entered the state, he was interrupted by the evil cultivator Zheng Liming. When he went down the mountain to vent his anger on Zheng Liming, after a lot of hard work, in the end, his head was taken away by Lu Li. Wang Lu had always been extremely fond of Lu Li, but there was a difference. Lu Li's outer sky flying immortal sword strike was, after all, a head-snatcher. The hostility in Wang Lu's heart hadn't disappeared, and he didn't want to vent his anger on little Lu Li. Thus, he proposed a sword fight. As a result, before the sword fight started, another reckless person came over and asked Lu Li to be his opponent. Even if he wanted to court death, there was no such thing as this. Wang Lu had good self-restraint by not turning hostile on the spot. As a result, when Qi Xianying said the forbidden words, "Fellow Taoist, please stay," Heaven's shocking sword could no longer hold back and made his move. Of course, at the last moment, Wang Lu still held back. The killing intent in the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi was very little. Even if this sword strike couldn't be blocked, it wouldn't kill him. However, in the end, Qi Xianying still managed to block it. After this sword strike, Qi Xianying's look at Wang Lu changed. He had long heard that the strength of the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect was against the heaven, but unexpectedly, it was really against the heaven. He was 2 levels ahead of him in terms of stage, but he couldn't even block his sword strike. Under such a big gap, it was really disheartening. Therefore, even though after that sword strike, Wang Lu's hostility had disappeared and he began to put on a friendly posture, Qi Xianying still couldn't muster up his energy. "Senior brother Wang Lu's swordsmanship is superb, I am ashamed of my inferiority." This was the first time that Qi Xianying called Wang Lu his senior brother, which also meant that he sincerely admitted his defeat. The two of them were both the lead disciples of their respective sects, and their stage was similar. Thus, he, who had been cultivating for a longer time, should be his senior brother. However, in immortal cultivation, the strong were respected. After experiencing that sword strike just now, Qi Xianying absolutely didn't dare to put on the airs of a senior brother. However, although he lost in cultivation, he couldn't lose in emotional matters. Qi Xianying clenched his teeth and earnestly pleaded, "In terms of cultivation, perhaps I have no hope to compare with you in this life, but I still hope that you can give me a chance." Wang Lu was shocked, thinking, "This kid's face is so thick that it defies the heaven." Just now, he was beaten to the point that he almost spat out his sh*t, but now, he actually turned around and put on a posture of proposing marriage to his father-in-law? "You?" Wang Lu tentatively asked, "Just now, when I drove the sword Qi with Skybreaker, did I accidentally hurt your brain?" "No, I'm very sober, I'm serious." Qi Xianying's eyes were shining. "You, serious?" Wang Lu suddenly pondered, glanced at Qi Xianying from the corner of his eyes, and more felt that his sword strike just now might have caused some irreparable loss of IQ. Thinking that the other party didn't make any big mistake from the beginning to the end, he couldn't help but feel that he should compensate the other party. However, the other party was thinking about Lu Li, so he couldn't just compensate him with little Lu Li, right? After thinking about it, he could only, "How about this, I have an ancestral meat lingji mushroom here, I'll give it to you." Chapter 544. Qi Xianying looked at the so-called flesh lingji mushroom handed over by Wang Lu with great sincerity in confusion, and inwardly guessed what this thing was for. But soon, he changed his mind and no longer thought about these chores. Business was more important. "Senior brother Wang Lu, with all due respect," Qi Xianying said, "your strength, intelligence, and temperament are the best among your peers, and you and junior sister Lu Li have a foundation of affection. If I compete with you, you don't need to open your mouth, and I will not overestimate myself. However, since you have no intention to become junior sister Lu Li's Taoist companion, and even don't have much affection between a man and a woman, then I hope you can give me a chance." Wang Lu was stunned. He was not surprised by the other party's thick face, but by the other party's explanation. There was not much affection between a man and a woman, which was actually true. Although he doted on Lu Li, at least until today, he had never thought about becoming Lu Li's Taoist companion. Of course, having no idea at present did not mean that he could let it go at will. First, as a senior brother, he had the obligation to take care of Lu Li so that she would not be deceived by scoundrels. Second, resources could be reserved. It was just that, this was just his own thought. In the eyes of outsiders, it might not necessarily be so. He had also heard a lot of rumors about him and Lu Li. How could Qi Xianying be so confident that he had no idea about Lu Li at present? Because I can see a person's marriage and love fate. Qi Xianying replied. Marriage and love fate? Qi Xianying somewhat helplessly said, This is one of the special skills of Red Pine Mountain's Reaching Firmament Palace. However, Reaching Firmament Palace is a small sect, probably not in senior brother Wang Lu's eyes. One of the core methods of our sect is to observe the cause and effect between people. And among them, marriage and love fate are the areas that we are best at. Wang Lu really didn't pay much attention to the method of Reaching Firmament Palace before. Listening to Qi Xianying's explanation, he reasonably speculated, in other words, it's pimping? Qi Xianying couldn't catch his breath. At the same time, he was considering whether he should fight to the death with the other party for the honor of his sect. It was just that, thinking about the sword strike that scattered his Yuanying, Qi Xianying really couldn't bring himself to fight for a short time, so he continued to explain softly. In my opinion, the lines of marriage and love between people are real. The so-called marriage fate line refers to who one is legally fated to marry. Because the rights and laws affect the mysteries of heaven and earth, they are usually clear and distinguishable. For example, senior brother Wang Lu does not have any marriage fate line on you. Wang Lu nodded. I am indeed unmarried. And the love line is more complicated. You have feelings for others, and others have feelings for you. It will all be reflected in one person. It was just that this kind of thought was sometimes a secret hidden in the bottom of a person's heart. Sometimes, that person didn't even realize that they had already given their heart to someone else. Therefore, it was difficult to see clearly the lines of love. In particular, I can't see through those with powerful primordial spirits. Usually, I can only see the love lines of those below the same realm. And then? Qi Xianying sighed and said, Senior brother Wang Lu is indeed a top figure in the world. There are quite a lot of love lines involved in him. Some of them even come from cultivators of higher realms. I can barely see them, but I can't see the direction of their love lines. Of course, among these love lines, there are indeed some that come from junior sister Lu Li. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu smiled and touched little Lu Li's head. I really didn't dote on you in vain. Qi Xianying sighed again. It's just that this love line is too clear. It means that although junior sister Lu Li's feelings for you are sincere, they are also ignorant, which is quite different from the love between men and women. It's more inclined to the familial aspect. Wang Lu coldly humphed but didn't speak. He inwardly thought, isn't this nonsense? Lu Li's physical health education class has never been held for various reasons, so what the hell does she know about the love between men and women? However, more importantly, I don't see any love line for Lu Li in you at all. Although there is a love line, it's more inclined to the familial aspect, so, Wang Lu said, so you want to try your luck? Qi Xianying sternly said, I have a sincere affection for junior sister Lu Li, not to try my luck. Unfortunately, she is already taken, so no matter how sincere you are, it doesn't make sense. Already taken? I'm afraid this excuse. I'm not referring to myself. Wang Lu explained, although Lu Li is contracted by me, no one stipulates that the contractor must produce for their own use. I am indeed in charge of her marriage, and I have already found a man for her. What? Qi Xianying was shocked. In his heart, he couldn't help but wonder if this was Wang Lu's excuse. Because in his view, the most important love line for Lu Li was connected to Wang Lu. Besides him, who else could be worthy to be the owner of Lu Li? Who is it? Then, in Qi Xianying's surprised, suspicious, and expectant eyes, Wang Lu reported the answer. That person's name is Zhu Shiyao. Zhu Shiyao? Qi Xianying was stunned for a moment, and then he remembered. Your sect's big sister? Unexpectedly, that dead otaku girl actually has a big reputation in the industry. Wang Lu shook his head and then said, it's her. She is deeply in love with Lu Li, unable to extricate herself. Chapter 545. The Tomb of Immortals in Fengdu City was targeted by Wang Lu as his next destination. After spending a few months to sort himself out, Wang Lu began to take action seriously. In addition to awakening his previous life's consciousness, the other important significance of that time travel dream was that it made Wang Lu aware of the existence of a great crisis. Therefore, he could no longer do things as casually and aimlessly as before. Before the time travel dream, Wang Lu actually didn't have much urgency in cultivation. His status in Lingjian school was special, and he had already become famous even before he reached the small success stage of non-phase method. After defeating Qiong Hua in one fell swoop in the battle for the Five-Blood Spirit Crown, Wang Lu had faintly established his position as the number one person among his peers. Thus, the motivation to continue to move forward would naturally be lacking. At the same time, for cultivators with void spirit root, the highest dream of cultivators, ascending to immortality was basically an inevitability. As long as he cultivated step by step, ascending to immortality was a matter of course. Therefore, there was no need for Wang Lu to be anxious in cultivation. Plus, the overall environment of 9 regions was peaceful and comfortable. Therefore, he had always been relatively casual in doing things. Many times, he was pushed by things instead of actively looking for things to do, because there was no need. But now the situation was different. The threat of the fallen immortals was like a sword hanging over his head, and with his current strength, he was afraid that he was not even qualified to be cannon fodder. In the Great War of Immortals, everyone below the level of Supreme was like an ant, and a mere King Pill was not even qualified to be a guest in the art troupe to play cute and send warmth to the front line. Therefore, speeding up the progress of cultivation was an inevitable choice. As for the methods to speed up the progress of cultivation, there were only 2. The first one was the safest: return to Spirit Sword Mountain, ask the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall to help him find a place with rich spiritual energy, occupy it, and then do a closed-door training. After a few decades, when he came out, he would at least be a Taoist master of Yuanying stage. However, there were 2 problems with this method. First, although the Lingjian school still had abundant spiritual vein resources, there were also a lot of people who needed the spiritual vein to cultivate, such as the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall, Lu Li, Zhu Shiyao, and the other successor disciples of the Misty Peak, as well as some other cultivators who were separated from the disciples but still cultivated on the mountain. Second, reaching Yuanying stage in several decades was too slow. Although it was better than a certain non-phase peak master who hadn't reached Yuanying stage in 200 years, it was still far from meeting the needs of Wang Lu. In that case, he could only take the second path, to seek a breakthrough in actual combat. This path had always been regarded as a shortcut for geniuses. As long as the aptitude and perception were high enough, the life was big enough, and they were not afraid of the karma of killing, then a life and death test could indeed make people's strength advance by leaps and bounds. The best example in history was Immortal Qin and Great Ancestor Disheng, the 2 people who ascended to immortality in just 20 years of cultivation. Such an appalling cultivation speed, in addition to their void spirit root, the most important reason was that they rose in troubled times. From the moment they set foot on the road of immortal cultivation, they were involved in the flames of war, which lasted for almost 20 years without a break. And when the war subsided, they had already ascended to immortality. Unfortunately, the theme of today's 9 regions was peace and development, so it was difficult to find a huge battlefield where people could fight for 20 years. Fortunately, a group of immortal tombs was unearthed in the southern heaven region. The endless copies provided endless battlefields. As long as the cultivation state was switched to the wartime state, one could obtain huge benefits from the battles. Of course, in addition to the above reasons, Wang Lu also had other purposes. The news of him and Lu Li should have already been passed back to the mountain. During this time, there was no movement on Spirit Sword Mountain. Obviously, they had guessed that Wang Lu had some difficulties, so they waited for him to take the initiative to return to the mountain. However, Wang Lu asked himself that he was not ready to reunite with them, especially her. Moreover, it seemed that it would not be easy to prepare in a short period of time. However, always floating outside was not a long-term solution, especially since the master of Non-Phase Peak had always been impatient. It was estimated that it would not be long before she came to find him. Therefore, it was better to go to the group of immortal tombs in Plentiful City to hide. In the independent copy, no matter how great her ability was, it would be useless, ha ha ha. When Wang Lu made up his mind to go to the group of immortal tombs in Plentiful City, on the Red Pine Mountain in the southern heaven region, Xiao Baya, the master of Reaching Firmament Palace, deeply frowned. His eyes were full of helplessness. Xianying still refuses to come out? In front of Xiao Baya, a woman who looked to be in her 30s with a flirtatious expression gently shook her head. He still refuses. He said that he will not come out until he breaks through this tribulation. Xiao Baya was silent for a moment, and then asked, "Then did you tell him that it was my order for him to come out?" The woman said, "He said that after he comes out, he will come to you to offer a humble apology." Bastard! Xiao Baya flew into a rage. In a split second, the thousands of red pine trees outside Reaching Firmament Palace swayed, and the red pine needles became crystal clear, as if they were weeping blood. Offer a humble apology? Offer a humble apology to me, his master? Who wants him to offer a humble apology? What's the use of offering a humble apology? He is the lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace, and every word and deed is the model for the disciples of the palace. Now, everyone knows that my words as the palace master have no weight. When the woman heard Xiao Baya's roar, she suddenly raised her eyebrows. Isn't it because you spoil him so much that he is lawless? Usually, he doesn't have the slightest majesty as a master. Even the most precious red pine tree of Reaching Firmament Palace has been given to him, and you can't wait to announce that he will inherit the position of palace master. Even when you are with him, you don't put on any airs. Now you expect your words to have weight. How is that possible? Humph, that year, master evaluated you and said that you are competent to be the palace master of Reaching Firmament Palace, but you are not a qualified teacher. This is indeed true. Xiao Baya's face turned red from being refuted. After a long silence, he stood up. I'll go pull him out. Forget it. The woman pulled Xiao Baya back again. He is now in a closed-door training. If this tribulation of emotions is not over, you can forcibly pull him out, but you will just pull out a walking corpse. Otherwise, do you think I will leave him alone and come back alone? Alas, tell me, is this tribulation of emotions really so difficult? You're spouting nonsense. Xiao Baya glared at her. You also cultivate the cultivation method of Reaching Firmament Palace. For cultivators of Reaching Firmament Palace, don't you know what the tribulation of emotions means? The woman shrugged her shoulders. I didn't feel that the tribulation of emotions that year was difficult. After my vows of eternal love were broken up by the elders, I was forced to marry you. You see, it only took me half a month to adjust to such a big setback. You. Xiao Baya suddenly became even more annoyed, but looking at his wife who had a cold relationship with him, he did not know what to say for a long time, and finally helplessly deflated. In short, what are you going to do with this traitorous disciple? I can't just leave him alone. Xianying's aptitude and temperament are too extreme, he can't rely on himself to cross the tribulation of emotions. Xiao Baya pondered for a long time. So, I have to take action. You take action? Don't tell me. Well, the knot in his heart is that it's rare for him to be moved and want to pursue a person, but he was defeated without a fight. His feelings have not yet begun and it has already ended, which makes him unwilling. Xianying is not a narrow-minded villain. If he is defeated in a fair competition, it will only make his mind more mature. But now, he has walked into a dead end, so I have to pull him out. How? Xiao Baya was silent for a moment, and then said, help him create a fair competition opportunity. Don't tell me you want to use the marriage chart. Are you crazy? Do you know how much backlash you will suffer if you interfere with the marriage of cultivators, especially the cultivators of other sects? Moreover, that person is a successor disciple of Lingjian school. Even if her cultivation base is still shallow, she represents one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. If someone finds out, you don't want your life. Xiao Baya said, of course, I will not overestimate myself and forcibly interfere with other people's marriage. In fact, I can't interfere, but what if I push the boat along with the current in a certain matter? While speaking, Xiao Baya took down a thick book from the bookshelf. The whole book was crimson red, which was actually woven from thousands of red pine needles. There were no words on the cover of the book. Xiao Baya picked up the pen, pondered for a long time, and then wrote 2 words on it. Wang Lu. Wang Lu? The woman was surprised. How could it be him? Didn't they say that Luli is a lily? Xiao Baya coldly humphed. Do you really believe that kid Wang Lu's nonsense? Lily. How could he think of that? That Luli has long been in love with him, and he also treats Luli differently. But Xianying said he didn't see a real love line between the two of them. Humph, what can he see with that insignificant skill of his? However, the two of them have not officially established a relationship. The love line between them can only be regarded as a potential line, which is very difficult to observe. At the same time, even if it is destroyed, the karmic backlash would be very small. Of course, for the sake of insurance, I will not do it directly. As Xiao Baya spoke, he slowly and painstakingly wrote down the marriage chart. Destroying marriage is an absolute taboo for the cultivators of reaching Firmament Palace. If it is not necessary, this kind of spell should not be easily used. However, the cultivators of reaching Firmament Palace have been studying the way of marriage for thousands of years, so if they want to do something, they will always have the means. While speaking, Xiao Baya's arm began to tremble slightly and beads of sweat oozed from his forehead. For a supreme-level cultivator, this kind of magical power consumption was already earth-shattering. And what kind of effect would such a terrifying force have on a mere king pill cultivator? What are you doing? To deal with a king pill level junior, you even used your true yuan. Do you want him to be alone for a lifetime? Xiao Baya finally finished writing the last word, immediately closed the marriage chart, and then smiled tiredly at his wife. On the contrary, the chapter one just wrote is called, Xiao Luo Field. At the same time, on Spirit Sword Mountain, Wang Wu looked at Feng Yin Daoist master in front of her with great surprise. What? A new immortal dreamland has appeared in the group of immortal tombs? Only beauties below King Pill stage can enter? So you want me to take Yao, Er, Shixian, Xinyao, and that stupid cat to plentiful city? Huh? Even little Ling Bear? She's not. Well, I have no opinion. As long as your budget is generous, it doesn't matter how many people there are, haha. During the period of cultivating the core, a little bit of carelessness could lead to the eruption of the core, and everything would fall short of success. Zhou Ming and the others had experienced a great calamity, so they were particularly sensitive to the fall of geniuses. Therefore, it was certainly good to seek stability. And from Wang Lu's point of view, he didn't want a girl with a temperament like Lu Li to experience any ups and downs. This kind of pure and dirty state of mind was like a work of art. However, the reality was, in the turbulent years, the most damaged thing was the so-called works of art. Wang Lu didn't know when the crisis of the fallen immortal would fully break out, but he thought that his generation should be able to see it, so. Lu Li, are you interested in the immortal dreamland? Lu Li thought for a moment. I don't know, I've never thought about it. Wang Lu said with a smile, the last time I went to the immortal dreamland, the background was set in the demon world continent. The food culture of the demon race is really interesting. Take the barbarians of Flaming Valley as an example. Although their civilization is backward, and their cooking methods are very open, seemingly rough, but the special environment produces special ingredients, which is unique. For example, there's a lava fruit, which has a unique taste. It has the freshness and sweetness of a fruit, but when it enters the mouth, it's like a volcanic eruption, and the taste bursts out in an instant. Senior brother, don't think of me as a fool who only knows how to eat. Lu Li protested unhappily, and then swallowed her saliva. That lava fruit, Wang Lu shrugged. When it leaves the environment of Flaming Valley, it will go bad, so it's useless to put it in the mustard seed bag. At that time, I didn't have a special storage item, so I had to give it up. What a pity. Lu Li's eyes were lost in thought, apparently already fantasizing about the taste of the lava fruit. Actually, it's not just the lava fruit. There are all kinds of stages in the immortal dreamland, so what rare delicacies can't be seen there? Yes, unfortunately, Master said. Wang Lu said, when did Uncle Zhou Ming tell you that? Lu Li replied, more than 3 months ago, when I first entered the Dan cultivating stage, Master told me. But now 3 months have passed. The time has changed, so the effect of the words would also change, right? Lu Li was stunned. Is that so? That's right. For example, after breakfast, you say that you're full, but what about at noon? Are you going to say that I'm hungry? Lu Li nodded. Yes. That's why Uncle Zhou Ming told you not to enter the immortal dreamland 3 months ago, but now it's not necessarily effective. If it's necessary, it's only natural for you to enter the immortal dreamland for experiential learning. But Lu Li still seemed hesitant. Wang Lu then continued, as the old saying goes, an elder brother is like a father. Now that your master is not here, I, as your senior brother, am the same as your master. Lu Li froze for a moment and then reluctantly nodded. Then I'll go to the immortal dreamland to have a look. Let's start with something simple. Moreover, I'll be accompanying you. He. Hearing that Wang Lu would accompany her, Lu Li no longer had any doubts. After entering the entrance of the group of immortal tombs with Lu Li, Wang Lu was taken aback by the sudden bright scene in front of him. In his line of sight, it was no longer the initial bright galaxy, but an incomparably wide square. There were many doors around the square, and each of the doors had a building. Many cultivators were walking in and out of the building, looking very busy. After a few months of absence, the group of immortal tombs had changed a lot. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as changing with each passing day. He still remembered that at the beginning, the outside of plentiful city was full of flowers, but the inside was like a piece of barren land. During this period of time, the cultivators finally penetrated their own power into the group of immortal tombs. The square behind the door was not the arrangement of Dixian, but the deciphering and transformation of the group of immortal tombs by the plentiful city management committee. People classified the entrance to the immortal dreamland, which could, to a certain extent, realize the artificial selection of the content of the immortal dreamland. Although the artificial selection would make the theoretical income lower than that of completely random, in fact, because the content of the immortal dreamland was controllable, the income would increase. Therefore, most of the cultivators who entered the group of immortal tombs would artificially choose the content of the immortal dreamland. He saw a long line in front of a door in the square. Most of the cultivators who came from the entrance of the group of immortal tombs were lined up behind this line. Obviously, this was the entrance to the group of immortal dreams that caused the crowd in plentiful city. Thinking of the report that he received as a member of the management committee about the record of the group of immortal dreams, Wang Lu could not help but be moved. Right now, he was anxious to have a breakthrough in his cultivation base, so the group of immortal dreams was the best choice. In the last group of immortal dreams, even the immortal treasure appeared out of nowhere. Unfortunately, the exploration team failed to get it even after a lot of hard work. However, if it were him, it would be difficult to obtain the treasure of Swan Xian, but at least it was better than the random immortal dreamland. At the very least, a great killing weapon like the 5 blood spirits crown would never be seen in a random solo match. Senior brother, rest assured. Wang Lu was suddenly speechless. Originally, he wanted to ask, do you think we should change the place? However, it was rare for Lu Li to be so enthusiastic, so Wang Lu didn't want to dispel her interest in the immortal dreamland. Therefore, he said, very well, you can do it. Remember to be careful, don't try to be brave. I'll remember. With that, Lu Li strode away. Wang Lu looked at her back, but he couldn't put his mind at ease. Seeing that her back was about to disappear into the darkness, Wang Lu suddenly remembered that there were a lot of props in his mustard seed bag that he could use. Thus, he stepped forward and prepared to give them to her. Be careful, don't go any further. At this time, the clerk's voice came from behind him. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was stunned. Just as he was about to step back, it was already too late. He felt a strong suction coming from the front, and he was involuntarily sucked in. A black hole opened in front of him, and a huge whirlpool began to spin wildly. Behind him, the clerk was dumbfounded. He went in. How is this possible? Beside him, several male cultivators who came to send their companions were also surprised. Didn't they say that male cultivators can't go in? Did the rule change? Strange, I want to try it too. Then, they heard a burst of sound at the door, and several male cultivators flew out, their bodies scorched black. The clerk was even more shocked. The rule hasn't changed, so how did that person go in just now? While thinking about it, he suddenly thought of an incredible possibility. Could it be that the original body of that handsome young man is actually... That's right, if he changed into a woman's dress and did a bit of maintenance, his appearance is actually not bad. However, he remembered that that person was still young and already had a resounding reputation in 9 regions, and his future was limitless. Thus, it was better to keep this secret with him for a lifetime. In the end, the clerk could only sigh with emotion. 9 regions was really big, and there were really all kinds of strange things. At the same time, at the entrance of the group of immortal tombs, several women came together. One of them was full of the smell of alcohol, and she was in high spirits, talking incessantly. Little Ling there, what do you think of the method I just said? Let that kid Wang Lu use his authority to open a hotel here. With the flow of people here, the business will definitely be booming. Moreover, if you meet a fat sheep, I mean, an evil cultivator who doesn't know what's good for him, just knock him out, drag him into the kitchen, plunder his money and treasures, and refine his body and primordial spirit into a magical treasure. Another windfall. Ha ha ha. Chapter 547. When the whirlpool in front of him disappeared, Wang Lu found himself lying next to a clear stream. Not far from him, Lu Li was happily fishing. Seeing that he had woken up, she flaunted a fish with a branch and shouted, Senior brother, look, I caught a jellyfish." He saw that the fish on the branch was crystal clear and soft, which was indeed similar to jelly. And from the teeth marks on it, Lu Li could not wait to taste it. Hee, Senior brother is right, the immortal dreamland is really powerful, there are everything. Senior brother, look at the fruit on that tree, doesn't it look like a piece of meat? Wang Lu looked up and sure enough, on a tree, he saw a sausage-like fruit. He couldn't help but inwardly spit, thinking that the structure of this group of immortal dreams was too uncreative. It was nothing more than a plant and animal exchange, which could only fool a little kid like Lu Li. However, now was not the time to care about plants and animals. The first question to be solved was, what was this place? Or rather, what kind of immortal dreamland was this? The content of the immortal dreamland was strange. Some emphasized fighting, some forcefully solved mysteries, and some emphasized interpersonal relationship. It was said that some time ago, even food, planting, and other sideline immortal dreamland had been discovered, which made the content of the immortal dreamland even richer. Based on Wang Lu's current needs, what he needed the most was a combat-type immortal dreamland. Because compared to any high-level method or magical treasure, what he needed more was to hone himself in actual combat. And it stood to reason that after entering the entrance of the group of immortal dreams, there should be a choice link for him to choose which type of immortal dreamland he wanted to enter. As a result, he didn't know which program had a problem, but that link was skipped, and in the blink of an eye, he came to this strange place. If this immortal dreamland was biased towards the plot, then it would be of little value to Wang Lu. Instead of wasting time here, he might as well give up. Secondly, there was a question, why did he come to this place? If he remembered correctly, the clerk at the door repeatedly emphasized that only female cultivators could enter, and they must be beautiful female cultivators. Wang Lu didn't think that the clerk was deliberately deceiving him. Lu Li being able to come in was a matter of course, but what about him? Wang Lu really did not feel that he was a woman. Even if he had a dark history in the ancient sword tomb, if that counted, then the rule that only allowed women to enter would be meaningless. A large number of male cultivators could use similar tricks to sneak in. Speaking of beauty, although he wasn't the rough and bold type, his face and body showed obvious male characteristics. No matter how he looked at it, he didn't fit the definition of a beauty, right? So what was the problem? The demonic jade in his pocket? The problem was, although the magical effect of the demon jade was extraordinary, in essence, it was only the most precious treasure of the demon world that was produced in the 5-blood spirit crown instance, so it was impossible for it to affect the entire group of immortal tombs. Or could it be that as the discoverer of the group of immortal tombs, he had an unknown privilege? No, if he really had special privileges, he wouldn't have had to work so hard to clear the 36 chains. There must be some other reason. Senior brother, where are we going next? While Wang Lu was racking his brains, Lu Li had already finished eating the jellyfish and the preserved meat fruit. With a face full of longing, she asked Wang Lu where to go next. Yes, it's meaningless to meditate here. It's better to walk around and see what this immortal dreamland looks like. The two of them summoned their flying swords and flew straight to the sky. After crossing the vast and dense mountain forest, they saw human settlements in a place surrounded by mountains. It was a bustling and comfortable small town. From a distance, they used their primordial spirit to perceive that there was no particularly powerful individual in the town. Most of them were just mortal creatures. A few of them had a certain cultivation base and magical ability, but at most, they were around the level of King Pill. Such a town was the most suitable starting point for the whole instance, the novice village. Let's go down. Hey, wait a minute. Before the flying sword descended, Wang Lu suddenly remembered something and quickly stopped. In theory, this immortal dreamland should be a country of women. The appearance of Wang Lu was absolutely unexpected. Rashly appearing might cause unnecessary trouble. Even if the people here were simple and had no evil intention, it was not fun to be stared at like a rare creature. Therefore, before landing, Wang Lu deliberately used the 5-element spell to cast an illusion effect on himself, turning himself into a woman. As for the specific image, Wang Lu was too lazy to think about the design, so he directly used his master's image. Although she lacked moral integrity, her face and figure were still good. She was completely different from the ugly duckling girl 150 years ago, a world of difference. Thus, Wang Lu and Lu Li, like a pair of cultivator sisters, descended from the sky into the city. Seeing the appearance of the two people, the people in the city showed just the right amount of surprise. Many curious eyes were cast on them, but there was no fanaticism nor panic. It seemed that in this immortal dreamland, flying on a flying sword was not a rare thing at all. At the same time, Wang Lu also looked at the people around him. As expected, this was really a country of women. The small city was full of women. Moreover, without exception, they were all beautiful women. Most of them seemed to be in their 20s or 30s, which was the golden age of women. Old ones were very rare. Most of these people were just ordinary people, without any immortal cultivation base or any other natural magical ability. However, these people's essence, qi, and spirit were full and exuberant, far better than the mortals in 9 regions. Any one of them could be considered as a 1 in 100 martial arts genius in 9 regions. Moreover, their innate vitality was unusually exuberant, which seemed to explain why the people in the city looked so young. What an interesting immortal dream. Wang Lu muttered to himself and then took Lu Li's hand. Come on, let's go taste the special food here. Oh! Lu Li was elated. Although there were many differences between this small city called Gorgeous Town and the cities in 9 regions, as long as it was a city for people to live in, there would always be similarities. Not long after the two of them walked along the main road in the middle of the small city, they saw a thriving restaurant. The fragrance of the food drifted from afar, which made Lu Li continue to silently swallow. Together with Lu Li, they found a place to sit in the restaurant. After confirming that they could directly pay with gold and silver, they asked the waiter to bring a table full of delicious food. While eating with Lu Li, Wang Lu carefully listened to the people around them. People always talked more at the table than usual. Therefore, conversely, there was no place better to get information than at the table. With Wang Lu's hearing, he could hear the conversation of every table on the 4th floor of the restaurant. In the time it took to eat a meal, Wang Lu had heard enough of the gossip and had a preliminary judgment about the background of this immortal dream. First of all, as he had guessed before, this was definitely a country of women. Because after listening for so long, Wang Lu had never heard anyone mention the word man, as if the concept of man didn't exist in the dictionary of the people in this place. Secondly, this world, or at least, the residents of this gorgeous town were very gentle and kind. There were hundreds of diners on the 4th floor of the restaurant, but there was no quarrel during the meal, which reminded Wang Lu of the new demon world. Thirdly, the people here were not much different from the people in 9 regions. They all had 7 emotions and 6 desires, as well as tea, rice, oil, and salt. Finally, this world was not completely peaceful and prosperous. There were still wars and disputes, and they were not rare. After knowing this, Wang Lu felt relieved. At least, he didn't have to worry about not getting any harvest in this immortal dream. However, the few questions that Wang Lu was most concerned about had not been answered. For example, the simplest question: if there were only women in this world, how could they reproduce? Did they have mitosis? Cloning technology? Wang Lu listened for a long time, but he didn't hear people mention the topic of heirs and inheritance. Secondly, what did this world need him to do? When each immortal dreamland was born, there would be an obvious or implicit main plot, or the main contradiction, which ran through the whole immortal dreamland's experiential learning. To put it simply, when the cultivators entered the immortal dreamland, they would soon trigger an event, and then they would embark on a ups and downs adventure. Because the immortal dreamland was, after all, designed by the Dixian people to let the later generations of cultivators practice their experiential learning, not to experience life. However, so far, Wang Lu hasn't been able to find the main plot. In that case, let's go to the temple on the east side of the city. After settling the bill, Wang Lu said to Lu Li, "Temple?" Lu Li curiously asked. "Yes, the temple." Just now, he heard people mention that there was a temple of heaven in the east side of the city, where the entire gorgeous town was enshrined, or the belief of the people in this world, heaven. The Temple of Heaven was a huge religious organization that spread all over the world. And Wang Lu was quite interested in this. A religion with influence all over the world often recorded many truths of the world. Because most of the religions actually developed around such questions: who am I, where do I come from, and where do I go? For example, the God that we believe in created you, you are the people of God, created by God, and in the future, you will return to the kingdom of God, and so on. Of course, these metaphysical theories were irrelevant, but the important thing was that when religions tried to prove those theories, they would often record history, which was what Wang Lu was eager to understand. Soon after, Wang Lu and Lu Li came to the east side of the city and saw the Temple of Heaven. The temple was simple and unadorned, but in front of the door, there were people coming and going, and the incense was extremely prosperous. At the same time, there was a powerful aura hidden in the temple. The only king pill-level powerhouse in Gorgeous Town was here. In order to avoid trouble and act in a low-key manner, after entering the temple, Wang Lu imitated other people and bought an ancient book that recorded the religious doctrine, Heaven News, and then quietly left. After buying the book, Wang Lu quickly flipped through the book and found a lot of important information. According to Heaven News, in the earliest days, the world was in a state of ignorance and chaos. At that time, there were also mountains and rivers, birds and beasts, but the living conditions of the creatures were extremely bad, struggling in pain and torture. Then, the heaven took pity on all living beings and gathered the essence of the earth in one place, which then floated up from the chaos, stood out, and formed the present world. At that time, those who were selected by the heaven to enter this gathering place were the ancestors of this world. Without exception, they were all women. These women, regardless of their figure, appearance, or aptitude, were all at the top level in the chaotic era. Compared with mortals, they were no different from immortals. Therefore, they were called human immortals, and this world that floated in the sky was called Heavenly Earth. Chapter 548. In addition to the origin of Heavenly Earth, Heaven News also answered the earliest question raised by Wang Lu: this world is made up of women, so how do they reproduce? The answer was, it was bestowed by heaven. In the teachings of the Temple of Heaven, it was stated and stipulated that when two women fell in love with each other and decided to stay together for a lifetime, they would go to the Temple of Heaven to worship heaven, and then communicate with heaven through a special ceremony. If their feelings were recognized by heaven, then they would be given a new life. Seeing this, Wang Lu could not help but sigh with emotion that the heaven of heavenly earth was really busy. Even the matter of mating had to be taken care of. But this was undoubtedly a good move. Holding the reproductive rights of heavenly earth, of course, it could become a unique belief here. However, interestingly, the heaven here was not a personified existence. Even the totem worshipped in the temple of heaven was not a personified idol. Wang Lu's initial guess that the so-called heaven was a personified existence, but now it seemed that it was not necessarily correct. Then, Heaven News also elaborated in detail on the question of where would people go. According to Heaven News, if the human medium immortals of heavenly earth achieved success in their cultivation, they could ascend to the immortal world and enjoy eternal freedom. If their qualifications were ordinary, then after a lifetime, their soul would be recovered by the heaven and reincarnated into a new life. If they committed many evils, then after death, they would be thrown into the chaotic world. This view of afterlife was quite similar to that of Zen Buddhism. At the same time, heavenly earth was a paradise sublimated from the chaotic world, but it did not mean that human medium immortals could sit back and relax. After all, human medium immortals were just human medium immortals, and heavenly earth was still human medium immortals. Compared with the immortal world that was rumored to be immortal and eternal, this place was still very immature. And more importantly, the chaotic world still existed, right under the feet of heavenly earth, and it was always eyeing the paradise above their heads. In history, the chaotic world had launched dozens of wars of aggression against heavenly earth. Although they were repelled every time, if heavenly earth was not well prepared, it would suffer huge losses. In Wang Lu's view, this setting was a more intense stimulus measure, so that those later human medium immortals would not lie in the shadow of their ancestors and stop moving forward. After all, although the temptation of becoming an immortal was great, it was not realistic for most of the human immortals. Wouldn't it be better to live a carefree life in the paradise of heavenly earth? However, the threat of the primal chaos realm made him give up on this idea. At the same time, in Wang Lu's view, this should also be the main plot of this immortal dream. The chaotic creatures from the lower realm invaded, and then the cultivators who entered the immortal dream, as members of the heavenly earth, fought against the invaders bravely. After making great contributions, they returned to the 9 regions with treasures. However, as he continued to read Heaven News, Wang Lu found that in addition to the main plot, there was likely to be a huge subplot, the Temple of Heaven. In the Heavenly News, there were almost no detailed records about the creatures of the lower realm, and the dozens of wars of invasion were also somewhat vague. Regarding the dozens of wars against the invasion, the Heavenly News only recorded that the Temple of Heaven played a central role in the war, repeatedly guiding the human middle immortals to protect their homeland. However, the detailed process was stingy, and it always emphasized, intentionally or unintentionally, that when the chaotic creatures invaded, the Temple of Heaven would give the necessary shelter to the heavenly earth. However, as for how to define the concept of necessary, it was a very vague concept. It could be assumed that it was closely related to people's devotion to the Temple of Heaven. It seems that this Temple of Heaven is simply the hegemon of the heavenly earth. After reading the complete Heaven News, Wang Lu could not help but frown. There was no need to say much about the strength of the Temple of Heaven. The most powerful person in the entire city was the King Pill of the Temple of Heaven. The rest were nothing, simply a crane in a flock of chickens. Of course, strength was not the problem. The problem was how the Temple of Heaven used this strength. Judging from the tendency of the Heaven News, the Temple of Heaven seemed to have no intention to let other people participate in the war. According to the intentional or unintentional guidance of the Heaven News, it seemed that when the chaotic creatures invaded, other people only needed to burn incense and worship the heaven in the temple, and everything else could be handed over to the monks of the temple. But wasn't this tantamount to guiding others to destroy their own martial arts? It was not a good thing to pin all hope on the temple and completely lose their own will to struggle. Moreover, this was also inconsistent with the original intention of the heaven. The sublimation of the heavenly earth and the chaotic creatures of the lower realm was to give the human immortals and their descendants enough intensity. Now that the temple of heaven had taken over everything, where was the incentive? Of course, this kind of thing was not uncommon in 9 regions. Whether it was a religious organization or a political organization, later on, they were often the first to abandon their own beliefs. The Temple of Heaven had been developing in the heavenly earth for thousands of years, so it was not surprising that there would be such a change. And if one wanted to dig deeper, this would be another big plot line. After Wang Lu figured out the Temple of Heaven from the darkest angle, he finally had a preliminary outline of this immortal dreamland in his mind. A big main line and a big side line, which was the focus of this time. Wang Lu considered for a while and decided to use the main line as the core to carry out the strategy. After all, compared with the side line of resisting the evil rule of the Temple of Heaven, it was more interesting to detonate the war between the 2 worlds. Especially the plot of leading a group of beautiful girls to bravely resist the invasion of the chaotic tentacles. Of course, one of the problems in the main plot was that he, a man, should not appear in this country of women. Once his male identity was discovered, it was likely that he would be regarded as a strange chaotic creature from the lower realm. At that time, he would face the dilemma of being attacked from both front and back by his teammates. And how could it be easy to hide his identity? Wang Lu's self-proclaimed mastery in illusion was not excellent. It was fine to fool an ordinary king pill, but if he met a Yuanying stage expert, he would definitely be seen through at a glance. And once the war between the 2 worlds broke out, let alone Yuanying stage, even a Taoist master of deity stage would not be new. However, on second thought, there was also an opportunity hidden behind the crisis. Right now, he was the only man in the heavenly earth. According to the law of scarcity, he was even rarer than a supreme-level powerhouse. This was clearly a unique advantage. Hey, is this the real meaning of the existence of this immortal dreamland? The war between the 2 worlds, the Temple of Heaven, are all just pretenses. The hidden plot of this level is the key. I will use my super weapon to let these women who have never seen a man and can only grind tofu every day taste the real taste of meat. From now on, they will become my exclusive meat slaves. No, that would be too vulgar. I should explain it from another perspective. The point of this level is to use my enthusiasm to correctly guide the values of these women and promote the restoration of yin and yang harmony in this heavenly earth. TSK, this is a full sense of mission. Chapter 549. In the evening, Wang Lu received a letter in Gorgeous Town Inn. It was a letter from a 7-colored spirit bird whose wings were surrounded by spirit wind. Oh? What is this? Wang Lu curiously opened the letter while looking at the bird that was standing on the window lattice and constantly combing its feathers. The bird's posture was very arrogant, and it raised its head high, seemingly looking down on everyone. After opening the letter, Wang Lu found that the letter was actually sent by the host of the Temple of Heaven in Gorgeous Town. The letter was not long. The gist of it was that the arrival of the distinguished guests was not timely greeted, which was a lack of etiquette. In the evening, a banquet was set up in the Temple of Heaven to respectfully await your arrival. Of course, according to Wang Lu's understanding, the translation of this letter was, "2 outsiders, please report to me here." The Temple of Heaven was indeed worthy to be the hegemon of the heavenly earth. Although in theory, it was only a religious organization that served the heaven, in fact, the tentacles of its power had already spread everywhere and were deeply rooted. Now, even the appearance of 2 strange cultivators in Gorgeous Town would attract its attention. Its scope of management was really broad. However, this was not surprising. During the day, Wang Lu and Lu Li ostentatiously ran to the Temple of Heaven to visit and even took back a few heaven news. During this period, they did not deliberately hide their tracks. And if the Temple of Heaven could not even find this kind of foreign cultivator who walked into its own house, it would not be qualified to dominate the heavenly earth. It was just that, Wang Lu did not expect the other party to be so straightforward. In the evening, the invitation letter was delivered to his door. So, should he keep the appointment or not? When he was thinking about it, he saw that the seven-colored spirit bird was impatiently knocking on the window lattice with its claws, making a gurgling sound, as if it was urging him. Wang Lu impatiently waved his hand. "I have received the letter, you can go now." The spirit bird suddenly widened its eyes and incredulously stared at Wang Lu, as if it was a young girl who had been molested by a perverted man. "Hey, what are you looking at me for? Do you want me to pay for the postage?" "TSK, the dignified Temple of Heaven is too tasteless, sending a letter and paying for it." As Wang Lu spoke, he picked up a peanut from the plate on the table and threw it over. "Hey, eat it." The bird angrily flapped its wings and swept the peanuts aside. It then let out an excited cry that was crisp and pleasant to the ear. "Tisk, it's just a stupid bird, yet it's so particular." Wang Lu threw a spirit stone instead. The bird stuck its head out and caught it with its beak. Then, it spread its wings and flew away. However, before it left, it flapped its wings and tail wildly, blowing a large amount of dust and fallen leaves into the room. After sending away the proud messenger bird, Wang Lu turned his head and saw Lu Li curiously watching the departing back of the bird, seemingly reluctant to part. He couldn't help but laugh. "Ha ha ha, I forgot to ask you if you like to eat roasted bird." Lu Li was slightly resentful. "Senior brother, what do you think I am?" Then, he carefully swallowed. That night, Wang Lu and Lu Li appeared on time in front of the Temple of Heaven. After thinking about it, Wang Lu felt that it was more interesting to keep the appointment. First, the wording of the other party's letter was respectful and polite, and it seemed that there was no evil intention. If he rudely refused, it would appear that he had a guilty conscience. Second, an opportunity to talk directly with the middle-level personnel of the Temple of Heaven was very necessary at this stage. After all, most of the information obtained through reading the heaven news was speculation, and many specific matters could not even be guessed. However, if he could talk directly with the monks of the Temple of Heaven, he had the opportunity to get more information. At night, the Temple of Heaven was no longer open to the public, and the door was closed. When Wang Lu arrived at the entrance of the Temple of Heaven, a plain-dressed girl quietly opened the door, welcomed the two of them in, and led them all the way to the inner hall of the Temple of Heaven. The banquet in the inner hall had been prepared. There was only one person at the banquet, a beautiful woman who looked to be in her 30s. From the characteristics of her dress, it could be seen that she was Li Yan, the person in charge of the Temple of Heaven in Gorgeous Town. The woman was dressed in a gorgeous and beautiful dress, which meant that she was ranked 5th among the 9 layers of heaven in the Temple of Heaven, and belonged to the backbone of the Temple of Heaven system. The phoenix hairpin on her head was inlaid with a blue stone, which symbolized the status of the leader. After a simple greeting, Wang Lu and Lu Li took their respective seats. Then, Wang Lu and Li Yan each put on a polite mask and chatted for a while, and then the tone of the banquet was set. Sure enough, as expected, this was a simple and ordinary meal to deepen each other's feelings. After all, no matter how overbearing the Temple of Heaven was, it would not go so far as to arrogantly offend all the cultivators in the world for no reason. Li Yan invited the two of them to come, but it was more for friendly exchange and to sit down and discuss. Since the tone of the banquet was set for friendly exchange, after a round of toasting, the topic quickly warmed up. Li Yan inadvertently asked about the origin of the two, and Wang Lu said that it was a hermit cultivator inheritance in the mountain. In any case, with how big the heavenly earth was, even the temple of heaven could not control the overall situation. At least, it was recorded in the heavenly news that when the lower realm invaded, many hermit cultivators in the heavenly earth generously came out to help. And Li Yan also did not delve into the hermit cultivator's origin. After skipping over the identity issue, the three of them began to discuss the issue of immortal cultivation. Wang Lu and Lu Li came from famous sects, while Li Yan was backed by the Temple of Heaven. Both of them were knowledgeable and had a deep foundation. The two sides' immortal cultivation systems were very different, but there was no lack of commonalities. For a time, the discussion was very heated, and both sides felt that they had benefited a lot. Taking advantage of the heated topic, Wang Lu simply extended the topic and raised a question that he was very concerned about. Fellow Taoist Li Yan, I have observed the operation of all things in this world, and all of them contain the supreme path, but there is one thing that I can't understand. Fellow Taoist, please go ahead. I see that all the creatures in this world are divided into male and female, yin and yang, and yin and yang are in harmony to reproduce and live. For example, the animals, insects, and fish on our dinner plate are like this. But why are we human beings different? Has fellow Taoist ever thought that perhaps we human beings should also be like other creatures? Li Yan took a sip of tea, revealed a smile of understanding, and said, fellow Taoist's question seems ordinary, but it actually hits the nail on the head. Why are we human beings different? I believe more than one person has been curious about this question, and the answer is actually very simple. Because when the heaven created us, it made us the spirit of all things, the leader of all things. Therefore, we have a unique advantage that other creatures do not have. Ordinary creatures need to be divided into yin and yang, each having half to live and multiply endlessly, but we human beings can monopolize both sides of yin and yang. I think this is also one of the manifestations of human beings being superior to other creatures. As for what fellow Taoist said about being yin and yang, I believe it is just an illusion during cultivation. You see, the yin and yang in my body are in harmony, there is no imbalance. Of course, if we talk about the root attribute, I am indeed yin, but this is because we are only the descendants of human immortals, not immortals in the real sense, so there is still a little deficiency. When our cultivation realm is high enough, this deficiency will also disappear, and by then, we will become truly perfect creatures. Wang Lu almost knelt down. Li Yan was indeed worthy to be the backbone of the 9 layers of heaven of the Temple of Heaven. The face of this professional swindler was really amazing. A ridiculous theory could actually be said by her in such a convincing manner. Then has fellow Taoist ever considered that some organs in our body look very suspicious? Li Yan blinked her eyes and said, suspicious organs? Fellow Taoist is referring to. Wang Lu very simply and clearly pointed between her legs. Li Yan was somewhat confused and also somewhat amused. This is the source of our happiness. Hey, is the joy of the Temple of Heaven actually this vulgar? Wang Lu had to patiently explain further, I mean a little deeper inside, the internal organs. Li Yan suddenly understood, you mean there. Indeed, I don't know what its use is. Apart from making those ordinary people who have never cultivated and can't control their qi and blood every month, it is meaningless. Wang Lu then asked, if our current state is already close to perfection, then don't you think it is unnecessary for that thing to exist? Creatures similar to human beings give birth to the next generation through there, but we don't need to do so. Instead, we are bestowed by the heaven to the next generation, then. Li Yan smiled and said, like I said, we human immortals are not real immortals, so it is excusable to leave some traces of imperfection on our body. In fact, in addition to the place you pointed out, there are still many useless things on our body, such as the cecum, isn't it? I think fellow Taoist is probably too obsessed with the so-called perfection. Speaking to this point, perhaps because she was already drunk, Li Yan simply said a few more words. Actually, I am very clear about what fellow Taoist wants to say. Over the years, there have been many people who have raised similar questions to you, including me. I have also thought that there should be a kind of human being in this world, similar to us but different, born masculine, But when I carefully read the ancient books of the Temple of Heaven, I gradually realized how stupid my question was. Perhaps in the chaotic era, we human beings were indeed divided into two kinds, yin and yang, but later the heavens sublimated the earth to become the heavenly earth, and our ancestors also stood out from ordinary human beings. Presumably, from that time on, we gradually changed. Wang Lu had nothing to say. For a swindler who attributed all problems to the heaven, it was a waste of time to say more. At this time, Li Yan also finished talking and began to get up to see the guest off. It was just before they parted, Li Yan sent Wang Lu a letter. Fellow Taoist is very knowledgeable, and many of your ideas are deeply inspiring. You have also answered a lot of problems that have troubled me for a long time. Unfortunately, I can't answer all your questions. But the Temple of Heaven is full of talented people. Above me, there are still open heaven, harmonious heaven, and so on. Presumably, they can answer your questions. Chapter 550. According to Li Yan, the several cultivators who visited the Temple of Heaven a few days ago had received several tasks from her. The Temple of Heaven often issued various reward tasks to the loose cultivators. At this time, they should be in Gorgeous Town. Wang Lu was very curious about what kind of sacred being would come before him. Before this, he had always thought that this immortal dream was closed, which meant that once a group of people entered, it would be closed to the outside world. Unexpectedly, it was actually open, similar to the 5 Blood Spirit Crown competition. Wang Lu was not worried about a simple dungeon raid. His many years of martial arts achievements were enough to rely on. However, once there were outsiders involved, the problem would often become complicated. Wang Lu was not worried that he would be hindered by others. The problem was that when he raided the dungeon, although he often took an unconventional path, once he unsheathed his sword, it would be a straightforward crushing situation. Those who rashly stood in front of him were likely to be directly crushed. Wang Lu didn't want to inexplicably increase the sin of killing, so he wanted to make contact with those people before he made his move, so that they could have a tacit understanding with each other. In theory, it should not be difficult to reach a tacit understanding. Li Yan said that their cultivation base was not high, and they even took over the task of doing odd jobs. Presumably, in this dungeon raid, their goal was limited, which was different from his own. Thus, they should be able to live in harmony. According to some clues provided by Li Yan, Wang Lu soon found these several cultivators in a house in Gorgeous Town. However, when he and Lu Li landed in the courtyard with his flying sword and met those people face to face, he felt a deep sense of regret. Damn it, I was careless. I should have found out that these people's magical power fluctuations are somewhat familiar. Recently, I'm getting older and forgetful. And just as Wang Lu's expression began to distort, the several girls in the courtyard also saw him. The next moment, an astonishing scream resounded through the sky. Sister Wu. Ah, that's right, I am now blessed with an illusion technique, wearing the appearance of my master. And this familiar voice, this amazing enthusiasm. Wang Lu's thoughts instantly returned to the past, which made his reaction slightly slow for a moment. However, Wang Lu only hesitated for a moment before 4 fragrant winds whistled toward him. In the blink of an eye, he was surrounded by the 4 girls. Even Lu Li, who was previously holding his hand, was pushed to the side. There was a constant chatter in his ears, and every sound brought back memories of the past. Sister Wu, we've missed you so much. Lin Wan was the most enthusiastic of them all. Yes, yes, we haven't seen each other for a long time. This was the eldest sister Tiandao Lan. You haven't contacted us for so long. You're heartless. Cherry said. Sob sob sob, we were abandoned by big sister Wu. From now on, we're 4 pairs of used shoes, sob sob sob. This. Yintao had become bad after not seeing him for a while. Previously, Wang Lu had a chance encounter with the 4 sisters in the immortal dreamland of the group of immortal tombs. He took the 4 of them to pass through the instance and for the first time came into contact with the secret of time travel in the group of immortal tombs. After their separation, the 2 sides only occasionally exchanged letters. They thought that with the vastness of 9 regions, it would be very difficult for them to meet again. Unexpectedly, they met again here. While thinking about it, Wang Lu felt the 4 warm bodies very intimately sticking to him. The soft touch spread all over his body, and what was even more intense was the fiery enthusiasm from those 4 bodies. No, it was not just fiery, it was simply explosive. In order to compensate us, Sister Wu, let's do double cultivation now. We've just made the bed, a luxurious 5-spirit crystal stone bed that can accommodate up to 10 people. Yes, 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 let's do double cultivation now. We really miss Sister Wu's telepathic finger. Come on, this time, we will definitely not faint so quickly. Rest assured, Sister Wu. At the same time, with such explosive speech, the 4 Yin and Yang schoolgirls moved very quickly. Tiandao Lan waved her hand to spread out a perception concealment spell that covered the courtyard. At the same time, together with the other 3, they began to take off their clothes. The Yin and Yang school's uniform was carefully designed, and it was also famous in the entire 9 regions Wanxian League. In addition to the most basic function of body protection, stabilizing flow, and other effects, the biggest feature was, no matter how gorgeous and exquisite it looked, when taking it off, it could be easily taken off as long as it was gently pulled by the mechanism. Therefore, in an instant, Wang Lu felt that the touch on his body was a bit different. At the same time, those 4 pairs of claws boldly reached out to him. Sister Wu, the last time we were together, you teased us, but this time, we want to take our revenge. That's right, that's right. You even told us that you have a little fresh meat disciple that we can manipulate, but he seems to be easy to talk to, and he's very strict in guarding his chastity. There's no flaw at all. Your compensation doesn't work at all. Yes, this time, we must take our revenge. Hee, this time, we also practice the telepathic finger, Sister Wu, you can enjoy it with ease. Seeing that the situation was about to enter an irreversible situation, Wang Lu roared, wait for me. At the same time, his non-phase sword chi propped up a layer of protection, pushing the 4 people away, barely maintaining the line of defense. Sister Wu, you're being shameless again, how could you use your non-phase sword defense at this time? Yes. Didn't we agree that we're only allowed to use dual cultivation to decide the outcome? If you want to protect yourself, you have to beat the opponent 1 step ahead. If you can make the 4 of us unconscious like last time, we'll be completely convinced. But this time, it's not that easy. We haven't seen each other for a few years, and we've been cultivating hard. So, come on, Sister Wu, let's decide the outcome again. Wang Lu felt that cold sweat was about to flow out. Decide the outcome your ass. Although he had never been afraid of any challenge since his debut, in this fight, he really had no choice but to be afraid. Especially when he saw the 4 girls had already stretched out their dexterous and slender fingers, Wang Lu felt a burst of pain in his balls. Is this the telepathic finger? Honorable Master, how much sin have you committed in those days? Wait a minute, I want to say, you've got the wrong person. Wang Lu said. Seeing that Tiandao Lan's concealing technique was not bad, he simply lifted his illusion. "Look, it's me." Tian Daolan and the other 3 girls were dumbfounded. It's you?" Seeing that the 4 of them had stopped, Wang Lu was slightly relieved, nodded with a smile, and said, "Because of some special reasons, I'm wearing my master's face. But, I'm the real Wang Lu, not your sister Wu with telepathic finger. Just now, you also felt my non-phase sword defense, which is very different from my master's." In order to avoid being regarded as Wang Wu's fake excuse, Wang Lu also added a few words of explanation. However, Tian Daolan and the others simply didn't pay attention to it. "It's Wang Lu. We missed you so much. I haven't seen you for a long time, but you're still as handsome. No, I can't help but want to dual cultivate with you." Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. "Hey, can you guys figure out who you are? I'm a serious person, I don't have any telepathic finger to serve you." Tian Daolan said with a charming smile, "You don't have it, but we do." Lin Wan was eager to give it a try. "Moreover, who said you don't have it? Aren't you men born with telepathic finger? Hey, I'm not happy to be called a finger by you." And just at this time, suddenly, the youngest Li Qingxi asked in surprise, "Men? Aren't women the only ones who can come in here?" Tian Daolan and the others were also stunned. "Yes, this is a women's immortal dream." "Wang Lu, how did you come in?" Yingtao suddenly had an idea. "Turns out Wang Lu, you're also a woman. Is your sister?" "Ha ha ha, that's even better. Since we're all women, let's be honest with each other. Aren't the trigger conditions for you to be honest with each other too broad?" Is the only function of your exquisite dress to be taken off? If they have wisdom, they would definitely cry, right? We will carefully teach you telepathic finger. Damn it, it's just a mere telepathic finger, yet you still want to talk about it endlessly? Believe it or not, I'll use my big excavator to dig you until you cry for your parents. However, seeing that the several people of Yin and Yang school have entered a fanatical state, perhaps common sense wouldn't work. Thus, Wang Lu had to resort to his killer move. "Lu Li, come here." "Oh?" Lu Li, who has been foolishly watching the show from the side, came closer. However, just as she arrived at Wang Lu's side, she was hugged by Wang Lu. "I'm sorry, I have a girlfriend now." "What?" The 4 women exclaimed in unison, and then incredulously looked at the equally surprised Lu Li. "She's your girlfriend? No, you actually have a girlfriend?" Wang Lu was immediately unhappy. "Don't tell me I have a boyfriend?" As soon as his voice fell, he saw Yingtao slightly tilted her head and said, "I heard that you and Hai Yunfan of 10,000 Arts sect, what the hell, where did this gossip come from?" "It's Sister Wu who told us. She also said that she earned a lot of money by writing doujinshi about the 2 of you. Your uncle's Wang Wu." In short, Wang Lu took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. "I'm a normal and loyal man, I won't do anything that would let down my girlfriend." Lin Wan pursed her lips and somewhat discontentedly said, "What's so good about her? Although her talent and cultivation base are indeed higher than us, and her face is also beautiful, she doesn't seem to understand the matters between men and women, so it's impossible for her to serve you well." Tian Daolan also said, "Yes, the most important thing for a woman is her inner charm." "Oh, no, it's her inner charm." Lu Li curiously asked, "Senior brother, what is inner charm?" Wang Lu patted her head. "Don't think too much, it's not something that your IQ should consider." "Oh." Then, Wang Lu sighed and explained to Tian Daolan and the others, "Yes, with her temperament, even in 100 years, it's impossible for her skill to be on par with you, but," with that, he stretched out his finger and untied a button on Lu Li's chest. "She has breasts." Chapter 551. When Lu Li's flawless deep ravine appeared in front of them, the girls of Yin and Yang school knew that they were defeated. In terms of size alone, Lu Li's chest didn't seem particularly exaggerated. In 9 regions, the value of D cup couldn't even be counted as 1 in 1,000, and it was even worse than those demons. However, as the saying goes, the amateurs watch the excitement, while the experts see the artistry. For the professionals of Yin and Yang school, the extraordinariness of Lu Li was clear at a glance. The aesthetic ability of cultivators was on a completely different level from that of ordinary people. Because most of the cultivators of foundation establishment stage could begin to transform their body. Even a 5-inch nail could transform into a 9 feet tall man, let alone a mere cosmetic breast augmentation. However, because the technology of transformation had become stronger, the corresponding aesthetic standard would also become harsher. In addition to paying more attention to details, in Shudan stage and King Pill stage and above, the beauty or ugliness of a cultivator was also measured by the degree of internal and external harmony. If there was no internal support, the simple transformation of the body was just an empty shell. And in this respect, Lu Li, who cultivated the brilliant sword heart, was almost unparalleled. Tian Daolan asked herself, even those senior sisters who specialized in beauty in Yin and Yang school had to at least reach Yuanying stage before they could reach Lu Li's current level. What Wang Lu used to show off was really an unparalleled weapon. Perhaps Lu Li's skill was as pure as a white paper, but her hard condition was too good. This was like, the most expensive fish-flavored shredded pork cooked by a famous chef could be sold for less than 100 taels of silver. However, a bear paw that had just been hunted from the deep mountain, even if it was raw, would be worth more than 100 taels of silver. The quality of Tian Daolan and the others was quite good. Unfortunately, they met Lu Li. Alas, I admit defeat. Tian Daolan put on her clothes with flagging interest. The other several girls also reluctantly lowered their heads. After the scene was subdued by Lu Li's big weapon, the several of them returned to the room and could finally have a normal conversation. After a brief greeting, the several of them got to the point. Senior brother Wang Lu, how did you come in? Lin Wan impatiently asked, isn't this group of immortal dreams limited to women? Is it because you have some special authority? Wang Lu sighed. I also want to know why. I myself am completely baffled. Then, he simply explained what had happened at the entrance, but after Tian Daolan and the others heard it, they just frowned, unable to figure out what had happened. After a while, Tian Daolan suddenly remembered something. By the way, do you remember that Changdi? She can be considered to have entered this group of immortal dreams as a non-woman. Cherry and the others were enlightened. That's right, Changdi too. Wang Lu was curious. Changdi? Tian Daolan explained, she is also a disciple of my Yin and Yang school, just that she comes from a branch family. Although her heart is a woman, her body is that of a man. Didn't they say that a man with a woman's heart doesn't count? But Changdi used to be a genuine woman. It was just that when she was cultivating yin-yang reversal, she accidentally went berserk, so she turned into a man's body. In the end, the group of immortal dreams still recognized her as a woman. Later, the elders analyzed that perhaps as long as you were once a woman, a 100% natural woman, even if you are no longer one, it can still count. So, senior brother Wang Lu, could it be that you are in a similar situation, but you don't remember it? Absolutely not. Wang Lu was resolute. What a joke, from the time he was born until now, he could remember everything, and it definitely didn't include the memory of his gender being reversed. From the time he was born, he was a genuine man, there was no mistake. From the time I was born? That's strange. Just when should I start counting my life? Theoretically, Ouyang Shang's time should also be a part of my life, right? Including the time when my soul drifted to the 3,000 worlds, it should also be counted as a part of my life. Could it be that there was something wrong with it? But Ouyang Shang was a genuine man, there was no mistake about this. Could it be that during the time when my soul crossed over, speaking of which, this was indeed an unsolved case, because Wang Lu didn't completely grasp his past memories. Regarding the time when he drifted through the 3,000 worlds, he only retained a lot of fragments, but it didn't include the part where he knew himself. In other words, Wang Lu couldn't judge what kind of person he existed as during that period of time. Therefore, the possibility that he was once a woman couldn't be ruled out. And when he thought of the time when he crossed over and became a woman, Wang Lu felt that there was nothing more f***ed up than this in the world. No, there's definitely something wrong with this deduction. There must be some other reason why I could enter this group of immortal dreams. Let's change the topic. Wang Lu let out a long sigh and then casually asked, "Is there any appraisal result on the heavenly silk headscarf?" A few years ago, when he experienced the time travel scene in the immortal dreamland for the first time, that heavenly silk headscarf became the key evidence to prove whether time travel really existed. Unfortunately, after a few years, Yin and Yang school still couldn't come up with a reliable answer. Even today, whether time travel existed or not was still an unsolved mystery of the group of immortal tombs. However, many people had already forgotten about that heavenly silk headscarf. When it came to the heavenly silk headscarf, Tian Dao Lan looked embarrassed. In recent years, there have been some results from the divination, but there are many contradictions between them. The elders have spent a lot of effort to deal with them, but the result is still very vague. Wang Lu said, "What if we exclude all the artificial subjective assumptions and only look at the result of the divination?" Tian Daolan said, "That heavenly silk headscarf is indeed one of the parts of the set of feather clothes." Wang Lu nodded his head. "Go on." "However, it doesn't seem to be the part that we lost, because the karma related to Yin and Yang school on this headscarf is too thin. It's like it has just been made and hasn't been used yet. But in theory, it should have been used for a long time before it was lost. Do you have any clear evidence to prove this? That heavenly silk headscarf was indeed used by Yin and Yang school before it was lost? This is very difficult. That part of history happened a long time ago, so the written records are already very vague. But, it should have been used. It's hard to make a set of magical equipment, but it didn't use it, it doesn't make sense. Wang Lu closed his eyes and thought for a while, and then opened them and said, "Do you think it's possible that when your feather clothes were just made, one of them had already been lost? It's just that, at that time, your ancestors made a counterfeit or similar method to cover it up. At the same time, the original one was received into the group of immortal tombs and then distributed to the later generations of Yin and Yang school in the form of a prize." Upon hearing this, Tian Daolan was startled. "This, if we don't consider so many of your assumptions, it seems to make sense. After all, the historical records before the Age of Chaos are too vague, so you can say whatever you want. But, the question is, why did our sect's most valuable treasure fall into the group of immortal tombs?" "Yes, why?" Wang Lu asked with a smile. In his heart, he already had a vague guess, but he no longer said it. "How's your progress in this pass?" Tian Daolan immediately complained, "How could there be any progress? Aren't we just doing odd jobs for other people? It's just some trivial tasks. The reward is not much, but the effort spent is actually not little." Wang Lu asked, "Then why did you guys buy a house here? Do you plan to stay in Gorgeous Town for a long time and do odd jobs for Li Yan every day?" Tian Daolan said, "We have no other choice. In this heavenly earth, we are unregistered residents. According to the rules here, unless it's Taoist Master King Pill, otherwise, being an unregistered resident would be very inconvenient. That Li Yan is actually very easy to talk to. She wants us to do some odd jobs for her here, and in return, she will help us with our identity. Alas, senior brother Wang Lu, if you are also doing a task in Gorgeous Town, you must help us. Wang Lu apologetically smiled. I'm sorry, I'm going to leave Gorgeous Town soon. A King Pill level city is a bit inefficient for me. But before I leave, I can help you talk to Li Yan and see if she can solve your household registration problem as soon as possible. Senior brother Wang Lu, you're really the best. Lin Wan was pleasantly surprised and threw herself at him. It's just that in the blink of an eye, a few pieces of her clothes were gone, revealing a large area of her snow-white skin. Wang Lu took a step back and calmly dodged. Tian Daolan softly said, after this farewell, we don't know when we can meet again. Don't you want to leave some memories? It's not good to have sex with each other after we part. But, we'll miss you. Li Qingzi softly said. Yeah, you too, Sister Wu too. After we part, we won't be able to see each other again. Even our letters are getting fewer and fewer. We are actually very sad. Seeing that these girls were actually on the verge of crying while talking, Wang Lu was too lazy to care whether they were acting or serious. He hurriedly took out another big killer weapon. Since you just want to leave some memories to relieve your loneliness, then use this. He reached into his mustard seed bag and took out a thick stack of video crystal stones. Among them, the images of his master Wang Wu's naked body could be found everywhere. These are for you. I wish you a happy practice of telepathic finger. After bidding farewell to the several junior sisters of Yin and Yang School, Wang Lu went to the Temple of Heaven again. Li Yan was really easy to talk to and soon agreed to solve the identity problem for Tian Daolan and the others. Then Wang Lu directly left Chongqing City and rode his sword toward the Palace of Heaven. The Palace of Heaven was the largest city within thousands of miles and was also one of the important strongholds of the Temple of Heaven for many years. The one who controlled the Temple of Heaven was Moonless Harmonious Sky, who was ranked 7th among the 9 heavens of the Temple of Heaven. He had entered the high-level sequence and was an out-and-out overlord. According to the information obtained from the conversation with Li Yan at the table, Moonless Harmonious Sky was likely to be a deity stage expert. For someone who had just stabilized his cultivation in the middle grade of King Pill, his level was a bit too high. But wasn't it interesting if his level was particularly high? You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.